Hello and welcome to Just Saying, the Wargaming channel. We are live. That was my first intro for YouTube and I've completely messed it up, but there you go. That's live TV for you. If you are looking to learn about the new Slaanesh book, which is releasing today for Age of Sigmar, you're in the right place. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into that book, looking at the units, looking at everything they do, looking at some army lists and discussing whether this book can really be competitive. If you enjoy the content, please do give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. Please do drop us a comment in the chat and we'll do our best to answer it, or on the video afterwards, and we'll do our best to get back to you. This book is releasing today, the day of this video as well, and is available on justplaygames.uk along with the entire model range as well. So if you're after that, some of that stuff as well, please pick it up from us. We'd appreciate it very much. So yeah, well, that was a pretty bad intro, but there you go.
It's fine.
One spot, haven't you?
It's fine. Good to see you guys. Thanks everyone who's watching live and that. So appreciate it.
Yeah, excellent. Right. So hello everybody. Let's talk about Slaanesh. So we talked about this book last week, and we had a bit of a review, and you know the reactions from the internet have been relatively mixed. And we think this book is pretty decent. Some people think it's great. Some people think it's bad. But I thought we'd maybe just start by let's set some expectations for what this book is and isn't. Right?
Yeah.
Yes, in a lot of ways, they've been over nerfed from their original version. You know, the original version of this book that came out was wildly powerful. I don't know whether it was the most powerful book that came out in its time ever. Like, I was trying to rank this against like Flesh Eater Courts and Skaven and Zinch and all these other things, and I was like, which one was worse? And I don't know which one was worse. But this book was pretty bad when it came out.
Yeah, this is a good running for it. Like, definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely.
I mean, results wise and like stats were around them, weren't they? And the numbers it put up and all that was definitely insane. I think that's a good point. I think people compare this book to then, and like that book's well gone. You know, they've dealt with that once, and we've not seen it played. Slaanesh did everything for months anyway, have we? You know, even in the format it was in after it had its nerfs.
So yeah. So what we're really comparing this book to, and keep this in your head, is the state this book was in before this one was released. So when they'd nerfed Locus, when they'd nerfed Summoning, and you know all the points had been changed, keepers were 380, all this different kind of stuff going on. So I want to say that they've actually got better since from the previous book in a lot of ways. But yeah, you know, there's a lot of things in here that have been over nerfed that yes, we could probably be a bit upset about. For me, particularly things like artifacts that have been toned down, which I don't really think was necessary. And obviously some of the points are just far too high. But that does mean, yes, it's not an S tier book. But what we're trying to establish and what we're looking at today is whether this is, you know, like a tier 1 book. Are you going to be winning tournaments with it if you play it well, or is it a tier 2 book where it might not be the best book in the world, but like still super playable and does interesting stuff? And that's what we're going to do today. Not being S tier doesn't mean you can't win games by attacking the meta in unusual ways or doing stuff that other books can't do. And this book certainly does have that capability. And, you know, if less people play it because it's not the flavor of the month army, like Lumineth or something, there's less chance that people will know how to beat you when you play them with this interesting stuff, which is good. And also, it is worth pointing out as well that this book is weak to shooting, right? And shooting's like really good and popular right now. So this is a hard meta for it. But where the meta different, we view this book a little bit differently. And, you know, metas cycle very quickly, particularly now we've got COVID going on. We've got a lot of new armies coming out. You know, you could see everyone spamming Daughters of Cain, Kylebron, and no one wants to run shooting anymore, which helps us.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of things going for this army, really, to be honest with you.
It's hard when you see it released next to Daughters of Cain, though, as well, isn't it? You know, from an expectation.
Yeah.
Like, you know, whenever they release 2 Battletomes at the same time, it's rough on the one that's not as good as the other one, right?
Yeah.
And
especially when one of them's got like 50 point drops on its key units and one of them's had its battle line increased by 40 points.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's a bit weird. Yeah, and there's, the other thing as well about shooting and this army is there's a few units in this army that, like the Mermadesh Painbringers, have got this reroll saves ability and a 4-up save, which is actually really good, and they're not far off being playable, but it doesn't work against shooting.
No.
And then you've got Fiends as well, which have got these massive combat debuffs that don't work, massive debuffs that don't work against shooting. And that's also a problem for some of the units in the book. So, all that said, let's look at what's in the book that we can use.
That was a problem for them before, though.
What's that?
That was a problem for them before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it still happened. Yeah, it was.
There,
Yeah.
Like I took Carrion Overlords once into an event where Slaanesh were going to be around, and I felt fine about playing Slaanesh, but there was just no one shooting keepers.
Ultimately, they are a melee army that doesn't fly, that up until now didn't have any shooting, that are fast but not quite fast enough to charge into combat on turn 1. And they don't have any particular special tricks around, teleporting or flanking or anything like that. So ultimately, they're actually the type of army that Age of Sigmar is quite unfriendly to, generally. And the fact that they're
in turn 1 fine, but
what's that?
They can get in turn 1 fine, but maybe not. It gets harder on the bigger, longer.
Can, but you are dicing for it sometimes. It's not like you're going 22 and then auto charging like plenty of armies can do. There's lots of scope to fail your charges, or at least fail with some of your units or whatever. So, and the ones that can get in turn 1 fine aren't that good in combat a lot of the time either. But anyway, right, let's get into it.
Sure.
Let's talk about the allegiance abilities.
Okay.
A little bit. So, Locus. Everyone says locusts, including Richie's header on this. I don't know why people say locus for this, but there you go. That's a common use of the word. Just take it down. It's terrible.
What's it called?
Locus. Locus.
You had that entered. I just added some letters on the end a minute ago.
You just assumed that I'd mistyped it. Yeah, good one.
I thought I'd run out of the amount of letters I could put on these.
Yeah, there you go. Right, so Locus. One of the things we said last week that we've had a lot of viewer questions on is, why did you say the Locus was better now? Right, and it's changed. So the old Locus, as a Slaanesh player, the worst thing that could happen is you charge a unit, you fail your Locus roll, right?
Yeah.
You attack that unit, you hit it, you kill some stuff. Keepers don't hit that hard. They hit hard because they go twice, but most things hit hard when they go twice. You hit it, and then the unit goes back and brackets your keeper down really low, or in some cases kills it, depending on what you're fighting. Or the other, so obviously that's one way to fail. The other way to fail is you do pass your Locus roll, but then your keeper doesn't kill enough stuff, and at the end of the combat phase, that stuff brackets your keeper or does a bunch of damage. And keepers are squishy, so if you hit a decent unit, decent, maybe not overpowered units like Mortec Guard, you kill you kill 14 guys in a Mortec Guard unit. The last 6 will put your keeper down to 4 wounds, and that's like an awful situation to be in. So Locus in a lot of cases was great, but still didn't do enough if your keeper didn't kill the whole unit. Yeah. The new Locus, what's great about it is, assuming you know how to position your keeper, which is a thing you need to learn to get good at, on the corner or side of a unit to minimize enemy pile-ins. Yes, you've got to be within 1 inch for the ability to work, but you're going to do that anyway to melee the stuff. They don't get to pile in at all. Even if you whiff all your attacks, they don't get to pile in whatsoever. So you've stopped any retaliation bar the couple of models that can hit you. So the disadvantage of this is it basically does nothing if the enemy's charging you.
Yeah, that's a big one though, right?
Well, it does. Not that it does nothing. It does less if the enemy's charging you. So in some ways, it's because the old one, if you fail, if you even if you pass the roll, you'd still have to kill the stuff before it hit you again. Whereas in the new one, a lot of the time when you get charged by things, they don't get perfect pile-ins on you. A lot of units with perfect charges on you. A lot of units with 1-inch melee. You know, they really need that pile in 3 around your base to get all the men in. This can reduce the number of attacks that you're taking potentially as well. So it's not. It's better in situations that you engineer than the old Locus. And you know, let's not forget it goes off on a 3-up now as well. It wasn't going off on a 3-up before this book came out, regardless of what it did.
Was it not? It went to a 2 to a 3, didn't it?
What's that?
It went to a 2 to a 3. Greater Demon still got a bonus for it.
No, it went. I don't know. Maybe I'm having a year off Warhammer moment there.
I think so.
Either way, point being that it gives you more ability to make it good when you play. And you know,
I agree with you, how you word it, where it's like situations you engineer. It's great.
Yeah,
like that is really good, and I like that point. Obviously, the charge back thing's tough. What about you want to fight twice? Your opponent now is like incentivized to remove the models that you've just tagged, and maybe you don't get to fight twice. Yeah, that's a bit of a disadvantage to it as well, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah, it's got. I mean, it has definitely got some disadvantages compared to what it used to do. But you know, again, I would take it because Slaanesh is a very aggressive army. You know, one way or another. And in again, old rules Slaanesh, if we ignore the fact that depravity was so busted, so it didn't matter if you lost your models, you were playing to wipe stuff out. And that was the only way. And there was a lot of ways in which wiping stuff out failed. Failing your Locus roll, whiffing your melee rolls. Keepers do not hit that hard. I'm going to keep repeating this all through the episode. They don't hit that hard. And they only do if they only rarely get back into the region of hitting hard if they go twice. You know, that's the only reason they've ever been able to do that. So I would, you know, quite happily take this in a lot of situations. And then there's some situations where I wouldn't. Yeah, you know, absolutely. But again, on balance of things for the game, the old ability was a terrible, terrible ability for the game. For the same reason that Always Strikes First was terrible, this was like even worse in a lot of ways. The other person just didn't get to play. So, you know,
its effect, no piling, is better than striking last. But yeah, it's like the situations that you end up in is.
Yeah, exactly. The situations are different.
Needs elaborating more on than just saying, you know, you can't
exactly
this as you strike, you know, in a situation and you've engineered, like you say. So
yeah, in a situation, which is why it's worth talking about. And you know, you have to now. The army obviously, I don't think the army hits it hard enough to like call it a glass cannon anymore. But it's almost a cannon and it's still glassy. So that's where it's lost its power. But it just puts the onus on you to engineer better situations and maybe do something other than just run 3 keepers into someone and then replace them.
The bit that I missed and didn't consider, you know, making some of those statements last time was the range difference from 6 to 1.
Yeah.
Like the 6-inch thing was.
Yeah, you have to be a million
on your opponent's turn. You know, that was so hard to deal with. Like,
yeah, it was, and again, that's where it's lost all its power. You know, it's lost all its power by not being as good in your opponent's turn. But again, you're a very fast army, and you're a glass cannon army, and you're good at at manipulating where your stuff goes on the battlefield. So you know, the onus is now on you to play more of a game, which yes is a nerf to the army. Because how can it not be? You know, it is a nerf to the army overall, but there are situations where the Locus is better, and that is now on you to figure those out. There's also some edge cases that are relevant as well. So Keeper of Secrets have the Sinistrous Hand, where when they kill stuff, they get D3 wounds back, which is one of the only ways in which they can actually be considered like tanky and good. And with the way the old Locus worked, on your turn when you charge stuff, you'd kill a bunch of stuff. You'd Locus it, you'd kill a bunch of stuff, and at the end of the phase, your heal, because it's your turn, you have to resolve all your abilities before enemy ones. Your heal would go off before the enemy piled into you, so your heal would do nothing. Whereas with this new one, because they pile in during the normal phase, you get your heal off at the end and get to mitigate some of the damage. So when you are leaving them with 6 guys alive who are hitting you or whatever, and you take some damage off them, you do actually get to heal D3 wounds like every phase off this now, whereas before it just did nothing. which some edge cases that just bring it up a little bit more as well. I like
a couple of the comments here, right? Too. So this one, by the Yorkshire Independence Movement, is certainly highlighting that it's worse than the previous one, but
in their turn,
in their turn, How bad was it though when you couldn't charge these units? I think for the game, I hated that situation. I'm looking at that unit, I want to charge it, I want to kill it, I can't. It's just going to make 2+, 3+ even, make me strike last, I'm dead. It was horrible. So I'm so glad that is gone, even if it does make the army a little bit worse. And it's getting highlighted there as well. It's much more interesting gameplay-wise. My last couple of games, it feels more interactive playing with and against. So I think they've done some good stuff there. In making the change. So I worry about the Paladin one, because you know what I hate about the Paladin one is the thing that gets highlighted in the deep kill one with picking off units in models.
Yeah.
You know that fix they done to try and stop you having units strung out and all that. And it just made this other interaction, which is just lame, where you pick a model in the middle of the unit out. So this isn't prevalent in this army, but if it's a thing that carries on going forward, we've seen it twice now already, when they get a rule, they like it, don't they? So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the summoning allegiance abilities. So this is interesting now, right? So
it's a big comparison for me. I think this is the discussion about how good they are now to what they were before.
Yeah. So obviously not as good as original summoning.
Except for points.
Not as good as original summoning, it can't be.
Okay, no, not Edition 1 though, but they did get changed a lot.
Yeah, better than what it was before. There's a bunch of reasons why it's easier to generate now. Obviously, you just generate it off any unit now. It means anything can generate depravity. You're not relying on only taking keepers, which opens up the army a little bit. You're not relying on your opponents having models you could generate it off. You can just generate it off any unit. When there's lots of units on the board, you can generate tons. Even though you can only summon one model a turn, double turns exist. You can bank the points; they don't all go like corn, etc. So there's lots of ways you can do this. And realistically, you will, on the important turns of the game, where any combat is mostly happening, generate 12 to summon something. I don't think it is correct to say that you're always going to summon a Keeper of Secrets. That seems to be internet wisdom right now, because the Keeper of Secrets command ability has been nerfed. So if you summon one Keeper of Secrets, they're not that good. But that is a reason to be playing multiple Keepers in your army, to mean that after summoning, you've always got at least 2 so they can command ability each other. 30 Demonettes is also very attractive on 12. Because 30 Demonettes in the mid game, summoned not far away from stuff where they can go and charge, is super good as well.
What you summons an army list thing a lot as well. So
it is. Yeah, I mean,
if you've got a unit that can fight in your list, then maybe you want a keeper to make it fight twice, right? Because it's not just keepers fighting twice, yeah?
Yes, sorry, yeah. I'm talking about the situation where people are wanting to summon a keeper and have it go and do something rather than anything else. But you might just summon it for its command ability, yeah. Which is also valid because it means it contributes even if it doesn't make its charge roll as well. I'm just going to pick the book up here and look at a couple of things, though. So I went through this list and had a look at what depravity, how many points you get per depravity onto the board.
Yeah, this is a good relevant skill inside as well.
Yeah, not always relevant in the context of what you need to summon at the time. But then I did it again in my head with what points I think the units are actually worth. Because at this point, when you're summoning them, the real points cost actually doesn't matter. What we care about is what points cost they probably should be, to decide what's best on the table. So obviously, the more depravity you spend, the more you generally tend to get per depravity point. But most of the time, it's in the region of sort of 22 to 28, something like that, points. And that's sort of okay. But when you look at some of the units, it makes the units not good. 3 Seeker Chariots for 10 points, they're not actually very good. Seeker Chariots, really. So it's maybe not a summon that you'd want. But for me, the summons you're looking at on this list, Keeper of Secrets or Demonettes if you're on 12, almost always. But you've also got options on things like the Contorted Epitome for 9, which is good. Which means that you get access to the spell, which is giving everyone rerolls. You get access to another Locus onto the board. You get access to its own ability to protect itself. So that's maybe a good summon in there, even though it's maybe not quite worth the points. And you've also got the Herald on Exalted Chariot for 9 as well, which, as I said last week, is really good. So you will be hitting 12 most turns, but I think people are overestimating being able to hit 12 every turn a little bit, and I think often you won't.
I think knowing the direction you've gone with lists, and which we're going to get to later, and knowing look at the mood on the internet, I think people are going to force it more than you want to force it.
Yes,
I think, exactly. And then again, it's what you've got in your army. Is it better than, obviously, there's how many spawns are we going to run an endless spell over, and things like that. Yeah. So is that list any good?
Yeah,
we don't think so. But
certainly,
you could. And my lists later want to have a nod towards it. Like pushing those numbers into range. Because I think you'd really like to put a keeper on the board or something on the board at 12 points turn 2. In my opinion, I think that would be great.
Oh yeah, I think you. Certainly, if turn 1 is a non-engagement turn where you're just standing off a little bit and you're going to generate like 4 depravity or something, you're always going to have 12 on turn 2 when you clash. So turn 2s,
you don't get to use them till turn 3, do you?
Well, unless they make their charge.
Yeah, unless there's a load of
quite a lot, and depending on where you summon them as well. But yeah,
you don't get your depravity points until the end of your battle shock turn, and then you've got to wait till your next turn to do it. So it's quite delayed.
Yeah, it does, and I think that's when you talk about the order of summoning as well. When you think about like double turns and stuff like that, depending on the way the turn orders go, you might actually find yourself like, I don't think you're going to generate 12 in a single turn rather than battle round. Some people seem to think that you are going to do that a lot, which means that if you get a double turn a lot of the time, you might end up with a bunch of wasted depravity. Depending on how it goes, because you can only summon 1 a turn, and you can only summon 6 units over the game total. And if your turns go in the wrong order, then you might, you're capped on the number of things you can effectively spend depravity on. And so, where the other problem is, I think, where people are making mistakes in list building, is that you see a lot of people putting all these beastmen and all these super cheap units on the board and saying these are great, they're going to generate me loads of depravity. Well, that you might generate the depravity, but it doesn't come fast enough or quick enough, and the units you summon aren't impactful enough to make up for the fact you've just put a terrible army on the board.
Yeah,
that's a surprise. One of the mistakes.
Yeah, I feel that too. It's a hell of a lot of points of an army, a lot. Okay, what's it minimum? Like 500 for 10 spawn, and then some endless spell that you may or may not get off, or as Mr. Darren Watson, who's in the chat here, has talked about a lot, the Formanoid Crusher, and that's very dicey to do it. So you've got to spend a lot of points to put a keeper or 30 demonettes on the board.
Yeah, and it's just not worth it. It's not worth going all in on the summoning, because you can only summon 1 model a turn. So as soon as you go over 12, you've wasted everything that you do. I think the best way to, but all that said,
you want to be able to do it every turn, though, don't you? You see, like that's like
yes. So I think the summoning is very good, and I think that leaning into it to try to make sure you get 12 every turn is the thing that can bring the army back up to what it's sort of losing from a lot of these changes. But I don't think it's that important to lean so hard into it to guarantee your 12 every turn, because there are good things a few points less that will make a difference. Putting that epitome on the board and giving you a double caster super mobile that brings a Locus that can tie units up in combat on a 4-up, they can't attack it, all this kind of stuff is good. Putting one of them Bladebringer Exalted Chariots on the board is good. So what you lose to lean in to guarantee those 12 depravity points, I don't think is worth losing having a good army for. I think it's just important, and also because the way the turns work out can mess up your ability to actually summon things as well. If you could summon multiple units in a turn, great. If you could go, I've generated 20 depravity, look at this, fantastic, you bang out a load of stuff, but you can't, you're capped. So I think that the summoning is good. Sorry, there's one thing I've missed out there as well. Where you can summon is also difficult, right? So we've got a change to the Feign, which lets you use the Feign as a summoning point, but it's a terrain piece, so it's restricted where it can go, and your opponent knows where your stuff's going to go, is the other problem. So your opponent can screen out the Feign, so it can't be summoned from, or your opponent can screen out the bit of the Feign that matters in terms of figuring out, where you're going to summon from. And, the heroes in this army, not the absolute best heroes in the game at all. The keeper, very important, but they can die. So you can quickly lose your ability to summon stuff in impactful places anyway. So then you've got to wait for the lag of the points to catch up and then summon it and wait for the turn. And it might not even be in the right place when you get it. So it adds bodies to the board. It catches you up in terms of the attrition war. But I don't think it's a viable tactic for winning games, certainly not against good players on its own.
Yeah, your opponent can control things a little bit. Like, I was thinking about a lot of time, like, I've gone first, I've done whatever I want to do, be it maybe, do some shooting, got some depravity in my opponent's turn. Hopefully he does something, and then I get a bunch more, and then it's my turn too, and I've got a good number. But, what if my opponent's gone first and just play like a negative turn, which is not a situation they want to be in. So, like, you don't choose first turn, do you? Or maybe, like, I doubt Slaanesh has control the list we wrote anyway. I doubt we're controlling who chooses a lot. But I like that if you're given to go first, you can, like, do your thing. Start getting some depravity, and then, your opponent maybe has to do something on their turn too. And, you go into a dice roll and you've got 12 depravity or something. So it's, I really love their summoning rules, like.
So do I. I think they're great. Yeah.
I just think I think the boss, like, how they're generated, I think it looks to be interesting in the game. Can you just run an endless spell over all your spawn? Yes. Okay. Or whatever you choose to. And that's disappointing. If that's, like, what come out of this book, then there's something wrong with what's being put out here, isn't there? Really,
if the book was better in general outside of the summoning, then maybe that would be more of a problem. But I don't think doing that is a viable plan right now. I think what you do is what you get for it is too expensive. I think you generate again, 1 unit a turn, so you're generating this depravity most turns anyway. So spending a load of points on generating the depravity, not that great. Like I said before, one depravity point, 25 points approximately, depending on what you're summoning. So not really that super efficient.
Let's say you're doing it spell wise as well, and you get a turn 1. Are you going to get it again against Tefless, against Croak, against other? Because you're just rolling dice to cast these spells, aren't you?
And there's the opportunity cost of doing it as well. It's a spell that you're not using on something else. It means that you are having to cast that instead of maybe some other spell you might be casting, some other plan you could be doing. There's lots of reasons why.
Taking scribes, like, that's a good one. They force the spells through, but they also have got like no wounds and will just die to.
Yeah, you've spent a bunch of points to generate some depravity, which doesn't really start affecting the game for at least another turn, potentially 2, depending on how the turn rolls go, when you could have just spent those points in your army list to start with. And you've got to remember that points in Age of Sigmar and all games like this, the points of things get less valuable as the game goes on. Your points are worth more on turn 1 when they all do more things and interact with more stuff. As summoning a unit, the obvious example of that is summoning a unit on turn 6 is significantly less good than summoning a unit on turn 1. So it's much better in a lot of cases to have 100 points on the board turn 1 than 150 points on the board on turn 2, because you've got more active time with them on the board doing things. It depends. That's a bit of a generalization. To sum up, summoning is good, but I don't think leaning into it and building your army around it, except passively, is a good idea.
Yeah, I've definitely had a nod to it in my build, and I think there's some ways that you can help ramp it up. Get a few points in there, push those numbers up, and maybe make some difficult decisions for your opponents as well. And we'll talk about it in the lists a little bit more. For me, they've made a good mechanic here, though. Hopefully, it doesn't end up really, really dumb.
It is. I would cautiously say it's one of the better summoner mechanics that is less likely to be broken that we've seen for quite a while, and it plays better. Right, so shall we move on to Warscrolls?
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the Warscrolls. So we're going to talk about the key Warscrolls from the Hedonites book now, and also the key Warscrolls that are from Chaos in general, that really make a difference to this army.
Yeah, sure.
So first of all, Keeper of Secrets, key Warscroll for the army. A lot of builds will be built around it. We've talked about it quite a lot already when we were talking about the Locus, because this is the unit that will normally be the one that carries the Locus. Interestingly, on top of that, something I didn't mention before, the problem with the Locus rule as an army-wide rule is there's very few models in the army that carry it effectively. And although it's great, if you're not running Keeper of Secrets, and you're probably not running most of the other demon heroes, you've got an allegiance ability that doesn't do anything, which I don't think is great. Like, going back to your point the other week, I think they could have probably added one more allegiance ability for the mortals, so they had a little bit more that was mortal related if you weren't running demons.
For me, its biggest miss is its lack of focus on
the new amazing model range. Yeah,
but you know what? I don't know. I've never done game design, right? And I don't do very many creative things. But I can imagine sitting there and writing a whole load of new Warscrolls, right, for a whole load of new armies, and thinking, right, look at all these new things. But that's just not. It didn't come over to me like that. I was like, okay, that's the units. Now what else?
No, I think you're right. I don't think there's a reasonable reason not to give them a little bit more to make them a real army if you're not taking that half. But anyway, complaints aside. So Keeper of Secrets, still a good model. It's still very fast. It still hits. Keeper of Secrets don't have a lot of damage on the Warscrolls, and to hit and wound rolls aren't the most amazing either. They're all 3s and 3s. They can whiff. But they do have 2 hits on a 6, and they do have the lovely roll a 6, makes your entire attack mortals, which is bonkers good. So Keepers are still great, and they're 340 points. And then, you've got to factor in as well, they're a double caster, right? They've got spells. Their base Warscroll spell is an okay one, but actually, if he gets in and is still alive in his next turn to cast it, a good one for generating lots of depravity, because it hits lots of units.
Mm-hmm.
And the Slaanesh lore and the Greater Demon lore are both really good laws. The only thing that's wrong with them is everything casts on a 7, and the Keepers have got no bonuses, but the spells are still very good. They've got a new spell that lets them fly, which Slaanesh really needed. Keeper of Secrets really needed to be able to fly. And they've got heals as well, which gives you this sort of small amount of heal stacking thing that you can do. So they've got really good spells. They've got the challenge ability, which is another way to damage something for depravity. They're quite good in combat and everything. For 340 points, they're still good. Their command ability is amazing. Sorry?
They're a leader. They're a caster.
Yes.
You bring Locus.
Yeah.
They're a combat threat as well, and they're fast.
Yeah.
What are the heroes in this book even?
And they've got a command ability which represents some of the best command abilities in the game, which lets them go twice, right? Yeah. Yes, it can't affect themselves anymore, which is a big change, but that doesn't mean that for 340 points you get so much for that model. It is an absolutely brilliant model.
In a book where you compare them to so many overcosted heroes.
That too. Yeah. So yes,
I'll not look at them.
Yeah, so Keeper of Secrets is still a standout model, particularly within its own book, but still a standout model just in Age of Sigmar. They are very good. I think the only thing for me now is because there's not really a lot of units in the book that you want to make go twice that aren't Keepers, right? Let's face it. And
it's okay.
Well, I mean, even if it's a bad unit going twice, it's still a great command ability. It turns a bad unit into a good one. But it's not the kind. There's no units where you really want to make them go twice because they're absolute murderers, right? So you mostly want to be making keepers go twice to get your full value out of this. So for me,
I think Glutus.
Yeah.
I think him twice is good.
Yeah. I mean, okay, yeah, big monsters. Anyway, he's even more expensive than they are. But what I'm getting at is, I think you really want these in pairs at minimum because they make each other go twice, right? That's like, if you're going to run a keeper list, I don't think any list with like one keeper is that much of a good idea. I think you take minimum 2 and you hope that your summoning keeps you 2 on the board at all times to keep the command ability train rolling. Or if you're going deep on them and going 3 or maybe even 4, the command ability is still good in that situation. But really, they're awesome, right?
Yes, agreed. They're good.
So still a key unit. Shalaxi gets a little mention here as a side grade. So Shalaxi's problem has always been that she doesn't have the command ability, right? The command ability is a bit less good now, and not good when you necessarily good when you've only got one keeper in your army. I think melee wise as well, I do think she's generally worse than a keeper. Like, the things she wants to kill mostly aren't things that you see a lot. Like, you don't often need big super anti-hero attacks, but when she does get them, she's really good. Like, when she does get a preferred target, she's a murderer. But the big thing is she's 30 points less, which is like quite a big deal. And in some builds, it's worth taking the slight what is mostly on average a downgrade to a keeper, just to get the 30 points off. So she's also a good war scroll, not something you go to first, but something that is definitely like super playable in the army. Glutos is the next thing to mention. Now, he's a support model that's decent in combat for his points. That's what he is, right? -1 to hit buff is really good. Unfortunately, the army is made of paper, so a -1 to hit buff only goes so far to helping you. It's questionable, depending on what's in your army, whether the -1 to hit buff is actually that good. I mean, it's always good, right? But do you really get your full value out of it? He's a double caster. He gets +1 to cast. His War Scroll spell is good, particularly if you're playing a kind of stay away from me while I shoot you kind of game, and you can make stuff go slower. And yeah, the other spell in the Mortal Law gives you +1 to hit against stuff. Maybe not go off all the time, but it is decent. So I've never liked Catacross. I've always thought he was a very questionable model. And similar for Nagash as well. Although I played him a lot, I always thought he was very questionable because he's just got to do so much to make his points back a lot of the time. I don't think when Nagash was good, Grimgash Reapers were good, and I always think what was really good was Grimgash Reapers, not Nagash. He just got all the attention because you couldn't cast spells against them. But I've never been the biggest fan of all those models, really. Glutos is just on the cheap enough end. He's just on the cheap enough end that you can not call him a pure support model. He just does enough, and I think his War Scroll's good. I think he could probably come down 20 points, but I think he's good.
Yeah, I like him. He's featured in the lists I'm taking. I think he's good. He's resilient. Got a lot of wounds. Got a good save. The -1 to hit's good. He fights decent. I like him as a big hero that can stick around. Yeah, and I like him alongside a keeper, so I like him fighting twice maybe in that as well. So I think he's good.
Is he a tough enough thing that you can just, where the rest of the army can be quite squishy, you can throw him in onto an objective or whatever and tank? No, not really. And he's only one model in any case. Like, I've seen a few people say, oh, he's great. You can put him in. He's not good. He does block a big lot of board space.
Yeah, you protect his flanks and whatnot, and he'll be around for a bit.
But he's not that tough. His heal ability decent.
What he isn't though is a keeper of secrets, right?
I'm going to pull this question. I'm going to pull this question up, this comment up from Dogegreen here saying when he played Glutos, he didn't die, but he doesn't think he got much value out of him. He was wishing it was a keeper, and I think that is what you will find a lot with him. He's a 400 point support model in an army where it is arguable whether he's got good enough units to support right now because of all the points values. So there's definitely a list where you can put them in. -1 to hit is good. Obviously, if you can start stacking up -1s, like Fiends, I've got all these minuses. Great. You can throw Geminids in there, another -1 to hit. Great. There's a bunch of things you can do to stack up -1s when you've got like an aura for it all to play off, which is really good. But yeah, so I do think he'll be a key Warscroll. I do think you will see him quite a lot because he is powerful. I just, again, I'm not always a fan of these models, but other people are.
Yeah, right. You see, Nicholas is making that sort of point as well. He says Glutus is worth a try, but no better than that. He's like a bad version of a Leviathan with some iffy abilities tacked on.
Yeah, I don't know whether I would be that harsh on him. Like, I think he's better than that. I think if he come down, I think he can afford to come down a few points to be good. I think right now he's a little bit like, because this army is generally quite overcosted, him and a Keeper of Secrets fight for positions and 160 points less.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of a hard sell. Next unit, Bliss Barb Seekers. These are the best units in the book, in my opinion. I think these are what I've written down on my notes here is I think these are an S tier unit in an army that's got nothing to support them. Really, I think is
yeah. So I like
these in the army. Yeah, like one of the things that's notable in this book is how absolutely nothing buff shooting. And they've given them a bunch of new shooting units. Like everything is melee, do this. Even one of the abilities is really weirdly worded on the Shadow Mage, whose name I can never remember. You roll is a dice, and on a 3+ in the shooting phase, he gives stuff +1 to hit in the combat phase. It's just such weirdly worded that makes me think at some point you did it in the shooting phase and it was just +1 to hit.
Yeah,
and they didn't reword it properly. So it's if these had some support, whether that's from abilities or whatever, they could be genuinely S tier. But right now they are just very good. So yeah, let's look at them. 180 points for 20 wounds, right?
Yeah.
So let that sink in first.
Yeah. And look at Darren's comments here as well for the points.
Yeah, can't get over the price difference between these archers and foot archers. I know. So 180 points for 20 wounds is not like a points bracket versus wounds we like almost ever see, and they're super fast as well. And that alone just makes them a reasonably solid unit. But then you tack onto that, they've got shooting, which is not the best shooting in the world, but is decent shooting. And shooting is always good. Age of Sigmar.
Always.
And they've got three melee attacks each, two. Can't remember the exact number. They got a tongue and stabbing in combat as well.
Yeah, 3 in total.
It is 3, yeah. So they've also got 15 melee attacks. So they got 6 attacks each in a turn. They're so fast that you can legitimately charge them into something garbage, or maybe into the flank of a unit that is being engaged by something else as well. It's another unit to be getting involved in generating depravity. Obviously, they're going to generate it with shooting, but in melee as well. And if they get hit back, they've got 20 wounds. So if they take a couple, they might not even lose a model and generate you another depravity.
Yeah,
that's super good. And just having a unit that's this fast, generally is super good. It's just really cool. So these are absolutely
absolute ballers, these, aren't they?
Yeah, they're boss. I think they're the right cost as well for what they do, because they don't hit that hard, and they do only have a 5+ save to go with those 20 wounds, so that their survivability for their points is not exceptional. It's just decent. But if you take a load of these in an army, if you take 30 of these in an army, you could legitimately feed one to the enemy army every turn as well, just to slow them down while the rest of them are shooting. There's a bunch of stuff you can do, and they can be a screen.
Yeah.
They're maybe not the best screen in terms of just putting the cheapest unit you can find in front of stuff to stop a charge. But in terms of wounds per point as a screen, they're also viable for that. So
that super long screen as well, right?
Exactly.
Long base. So
long screen. You get, if these had been battle line, that would have wildly changed this book.
Woo!
Wildly changed this book. And it's a shame that they're not, but they are good. And a lot of the lists you'll see coming out of this book will be based around based around these. This is like good. You got any more to say on these?
No, I was just laughing to myself thinking about some of the lists, because when I looked at your lists in the document and I put mine, and I was like, well, Ian's got a lot more of these than I've got.
Yeah.
So
all my lists where I've got like 3 units of these, I'm like, right, which one am I taking out? I need to add more. Yeah. And then Bliss Barb Archers as well. Let's get on to them next. So they're my next key unit. Now, look, these are overcosted, right? They're 10 wounds with a 6+ save, and if we pretend there is no shooting meta, for archers, that's not the worst thing in the world, but there is a shooting meta, and most of that shooting meta, well, even if the shooting meta's got 0 rend, like the Luminet stuff, these are all just going to fall over anyway. For 160 points for 10 wounds.
That gets held in any shape or form, and they've got the short range bow I like, you know.
Yeah. So. Yeah, but their shooting is okay for their points, right? Their shooting is not bad. They've got a good number of shots. They've got a point of. People keep discussing these with me and saying, "Oh, you can compare them to this." It's like, yeah, but these have got a point of rend. Not all of them shooters have got a point of rend, and their battle line in an army that has generally got bad battle line. You can go out a book to get some decent battle line, which we'll talk about in a sec, but. You know, their battle line in an army that hasn't always got it, and they contribute. And in a lot of cases, I would rather have a 160-point battle line that contributes rather than 80-point battle line that can only ever sit on an objective and do nothing. You know, and that's what you have to question for that is, do you want to pay 160 points for that to get that capability? It's definitely not an auto thing, but I do think these today, for where this book is, and given that shooting is just powerful, especially with how it interacts with generating depravity, I do think that these are good. I don't think that they're worth their points, but they're important in the book because we're just so limited on what battle line choices we've got.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you compare them to Seekers, which have got slightly worse attacks, but double the wounds, a 5+ save, and move 14 inches for 20 points more, it's be hard on the owl maths.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the 140 ones you mean? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. No, compared to the ones on the.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were making a line comparison.
Yeah. Right. So the next key unit in this army for me, and you know, when we do these reviews, I tend not to go. Well, we generally don't talk about the whole wider, like everything you could possibly put in the army from other Chaos books, but in this case, we're going to do that a bit because this book really is going to have to, I think, to work well. The next one is Chaos Warriors.
Yeah,
I've talked about these a lot for quite a long time, even though we haven't been casting regularly recently. Chaos Warriors are really good. You get 10 wounds and a 4+ save for 90 points, which is a very good rate on survivability and bodies. Only 5 men for holding objectives, a little downside. And they get a 5+ save versus mortals as well, which is super good now because it means that Lumineth can't just quite plink your objective holding units off quite as easily, or, you know, Croak can't put simple mortals onto them just as easily or whatever. Or you can not have the shield and you can give them an actually relevant weapon, which is 2 attacks, 4s, and 3s, 1 rend per model. So these are a really solid unit at 90 points, but when there's 10 or more of them, they get to reroll that save, and that works against shooting as well. That's when they get really good. 180 points for 20 wounds with a 4+ rerollable and either a decent melee weapon or a 5+ versus mortals is really, really good.
What's
that?
What about Painbringers?
Painbringers?
They compare so much, don't they?
Oh, yeah, when you compare these to Mermadesh Painbringers.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did. Just think.
Yeah. Well, I didn't do the comparison because I just didn't bother because it was too bad for the Painbringers.
Because Hedonite wise, the one thing that always stands out to me is, can they fight twice from keepers, right?
Yeah.
That's about where it ends, though, isn't it? Is that right?
I mean, there's obviously the Hedonite buffs can buff like Painbringers if you're playing them as battle line or whatever, but they just don't hit hard enough.
I guess, yeah, look, it's not really comparing Painbringers against Chaos Warriors here because, look at the points. 180 compared to 150, you know, for 20 wounds, still re-roll and say, like, mad, innit? But
re-roll and saves against shooting. is such an important and powerful thing right now. But yeah, Chaos Warriors are really good. One thing I've been considering Chaos Warriors for a long time, and I've made a bunch of corn lists with them in, giving them all the buffs, giving them a load of stuff. But the problem with them is just that they're just a slow melee foot troop, and I don't think they've ever really had a chance to shine. And this could be the chance to shine. Maybe, because while you're having to fight against Chaos Warriors, they're generating depravity, and they might not kill the enemy unit. Well, we get a depravity off that. We get a depravity off being hit. This unit might generate 2 depravity a turn. They're pretty good, generally. So I think these are great. There's definitely got some lists with these in to talk about later on. I think these are the default battle line for this army: 90 points for 5 or 180 for 10. Depending on where you fit in, or you can take them in big units and actually do things with them. I have got a few armies where I've got like 2 lots of 5 of these and 1 unit of Blissbarb Archers. So I've got one unit that can contribute some extra shooting or whatever as well. So I don't think they're automatic, but they're good. And then a few more while we're on key Warscrolls, I've just got 3 endless spells now as well. Maybe could have been 4. I've got Mesmerize and Mirror, it's still a great spell. Geminids, because it's still Geminids, and Umbral Spell Portal as well. So I think these are all really good. In addition to Wheels, probably, I just hate how short range Wheels is. Like, it doesn't affect Slaanesh units now, which is nice. Can't come back at you anymore. But yeah, so the Mirrors generally...
It's got a decent, it moves 12. Its range is fine.
Yeah, it's much better now. It can't come back at you and hurt you, because it always did. every game.
It's easy to set up and do things well, because you can set it up within 6, which is maybe getting in your army, and is the path you want to take going to go over your unit, and it doesn't matter now. So it's not bad. All right. Why do you like Spell Portal?
I like Spell Portal because you've got the Keeper of Secrets has got Cacophonic Choir, which is an area effect ability. So just a classic: stick your Spell Portal down, cast Cacophonic Choir, do a bunch of mortals to things. I've got this in the key Warscrolls section, because I think if you're in an army that's going to struggle to generate depravity, that could be a good thing. And there are a lot of very powerful spells in Slaanesh that you can cast through a portal, like the one where you stop someone's hero using command abilities.
That's the one I thought you were going to actually say.
Yeah, it's an incredible spell. And I think when we talk about attack and metas doing unexpected different stuff, that is a thing that Slaanesh have access to, that they can do that is not a thing a lot of armies can do. Whether it's worth 70 points and whether you can fit that in.
Can't imagine fitting that in.
It is a different, but a lot of the time, you do come out with these lists that come to 19, 20, and stuff like that, and you figure out what goes in. Geminids obviously amazing for loads of reasons. Number 1, generating depravity. Number 2, stacking up -1s. And Mirror. I don't actually own the Slaanesh Endless Spells, because I never liked any of them, Mirror included. But I think now that you get that, again, depravity off a bunch of stuff, it makes it's like less. Spells, on the other hand, for me right now, when things go back to normal, I think we'll see a lot of Lumineth armies on the table. The value of spells that you have to spend points on to put in your army is extremely questionable for me, especially ones that do mortals to stuff. And for me personally, I won't be putting paying points for endless spells in any army whilst Lumineth still do that, unless, because it's just dead. Also, as well, Croak is unbinded and turn 1 wherever you are, and that's also a thing. And between those two, I don't think paying points for endless spells right now is that great of an idea. Personally,
yeah, that's a good point.
So that's all the key Warscrolls for me, and it's not like a very long list, and that's reflective of maybe the position the book is in. But that's what I think most lists are going to be based around is those things. Certainly when the Hedonites list, unless you're doing something which is a bunch of completely non-Hedonite related things in the Hedonite army just to get the summoning, which isn't really a thing that we're talking about today much. Should we move on to battalions?
Sure.
So Slaanesh have got and have always had really good battalions, right? They got good stuff in them. They get your drops really low, and most of them have also got very desirable abilities as well, which is not a thing you always get in books. The problem with that right now is that most of them have been heavily nerfed in points values at some point since the first book came out. so they're quite expensive. And the other problem is that some of these battalions include things that you don't really want to take. So, for example, you've got Exalted Speed Knights, which is quite decent, which has got 2 Slick Blade Seekers, 2 Bliss Barb Seekers, and 2 normal Seekers. But the normal Seekers are 150 points a unit. They're just really bad. Like,
the Slick Blades are awful as well.
And Slick Blades also aren't that good yet. Slick Blades are getting talked a lot about in chat right now, which I'm going to wildly disagree with in a minute. But yeah, Slick Blades, themselves are. I think Slick Blades are okay, right? I think they. But they're just so many points. Yeah, we're going to talk about them in a minute, so I won't go into it. But so that's a problem. Some of these battalions will get good if they unnerf some of the units that go in them, because they do good stuff. Supreme Cyberites is still really good. 150 points for an amazing command point generating ability that tends to go in an army with a bunch of keepers where you want more artifacts and you want more command points. So that's still really good. I think Seeker Cavalcade is on the border of good as well, because you can put Bliss Barb Seekers in it, which unfortunately means you don't really use its ability very much, but you can a little bit. What we were talking about before is using them to get depravity. You run all the way across the board, you shoot someone, and then you have a bunch of pseudo always strikes first 6-inch pile-ins to generate some depravity and let them hit you in such a way as you don't lose your unit, but you generate a depravity, and then maybe you win the turn roll next turn, you all just run away, or something like that. There's a lot of play in that, but I think the argument there is it's only 140 points as well, so it's one of the ones that actually...
It's good for pressure. They're good for pressure objectives and things. When they're say they're playing a classic, playing a flank, and they've shot stuff, but they're gonna then all pile in and bully 10 skinks or whatever. A Saturn.
Exactly. Yeah. Or heroes or something. Yeah. You can also fit Hellstriders into that as well. So if you do want to get really low drop, which I don't think this army can afford to spend the tax to get low drop really, but you can drop 3 units of Hellstriders into that and 3 units of Seekers and do stuff around that. So that one's, I don't think it's quite playable, because I don't think you can afford to spend the points on battalions in this army. I think you need the bodies on the board more, but it's maybe.
Yeah.
But the rest of them, Epicurean Revelers, Demonettes are too expensive now. Foot melee troops are not good right now, and this is a 180 point battalion. Depraved Carnival is just bad because you have to put 350 point heroes in it that don't buff the things that go in the unit, that go in the battalion. And that again makes me think that at some point them heroes must have buffed Bliss Barb Archers, but now they don't anymore. So why would you spend 150 points on overcosted anyway heroes that don't even buff the thing in the battalion?
450 all in. It's just
they've written there a 1-drop shooting battalion that would be silly and be really boring for the game, and then just nerfed it so hard you can't play it. Why was just not something else in that position in the book? Why does every book have a shoot a unit in the hero phase? Shooting's literally the worst thing in the game. Why do we keep putting that into books? I don't get it. But yeah, obviously 450 points on them. Then the archers are at 160 points. That's just not happening. And then you've got the Nobles of Excess, which is with just 2 borderline unplayable units in it. So I think Supreme Cyberites very playable. Seeker Cavalcade arguably playable. The rest probably not playable right now. Is my take on them.
Sure, I think that's fair.
Yeah. So should we just talk about some role players a little bit?
Yeah.
Now, if you're not familiar with the term role players, this is a term that's used in a lot of games. It doesn't mean Dungeons and Dragons. It means units that you put in an army that do a thing. They might not be incredible units, but they do a thing you need the army to do, right? So these are just Warscrolls that are maybe not the best, but maybe something that might go in an army of relevance sometimes. First one I've got is Silesk. He's okay for 200 points. He's a 9-wound model with okay melee abilities. He's a caster. He brings Locus, and because of I know your face is pain, but because of the way this army works, a lot of the time you have to find somewhere to put in to save some points on some of your heroes while still, you know, trying to get stuff in. And I think he's a potentially valid choice. His buff's never happening. Like, let's face it, his buff's never happening or anything. But he's got a good command ability because, you know, one of the things I didn't mention earlier, so Army's quite bad against battle shock. You know, like Blitz Bob Seekers, you know, like they lose like a couple of models, and all of a sudden you're losing 4 wound models to battle shock. So his command ability is good. His spell is another stop people casting, stop heroes using command abilities, etc. thing. So I think he's a potential when you have to put a hero in the army because you need heroes, but you don't want to buy keepers and you don't want to spend points on the 100-point ones because they don't do enough. I think he's okay. He could definitely come down in points, but he's not a bad all round model. And then I think the same about the Epitome as well. What do you think about the Epitome now that she's changed a little bit?
No, it's the points, man. Like 210, no wounds. They're all too expensive. That's why I think you just see keepers being unavoidable. You know, like you say, the internet chat, you know, we're going to summon a load of keepers. I just don't know how you're not buying them up front because I don't know what other heroes I'm buying.
Yeah.
That's it, you know.
I've made a couple of lists that I've ended up with the Epitome in because I actually think for me, like, the nerfs on this model were completely unnecessary. Like, they've taken away its extra spell abilities and everything was just completely unnecessary. And it's 210 points. But again, take it in a vacuum. It's a 9-wound model. It's okay in combat. It's very fast. It's a double caster. It's got a spell that buffs to hit rolls that does affect shooting, which is the only one in the book that does. And it affects multiple models. It can bring another one of the very good spells. It does get to reroll its casts, which is the most important of the 3 rerolls still. And it brings Locus, and it's got this funky new interesting ability where you can charge it into a unit, and on a 4+, the unit basically can't do anything. And then next turn is going to have to retreat. And whilst I don't think you would like just do that in the first instance, it's quite a powerful thing to have access to situationally. Like, I just want to go and try and lock your unit up. And because it's got Locus as well.
It only works if it can be sequenced right, because, you know, it has to fight eventually. So
yeah, obviously it only works if it can be sequenced right, but it can be sequenced relatively easily by, you know, the fact that your army is so fast. I'm not saying it's a great ability. Yeah. I'm just saying it's a thing it can do, and it's fast enough to do it. And also as well, it just protects itself as well, doesn't it? You know, it's another way in which, you know, a 9-wound double caster model can stop itself being killed. So I don't think it's terrible for 210 points. I think if the army wasn't struggling for points generally just to put an army on the board, you wouldn't view that quite as badly. You'd be like, okay, that gives me decent stuff. Could be a bit cheaper, but
so many points.
Double caster though, 9-wound double caster that can actually kill stuff. Like, it could take objectives. Yeah, I've taken objectives with this.
7 wounds, but
yeah, I got 7 wounds. I thought 9. Yeah. I don't know why. Like, I've taken objectives with this in games off backline, backfield units. You know, it's really fast. Like, it does a lot of different things. It's mainly a double caster. That's normally what it's there for. But, you know, but it does give access to rerolls, which is quite a big thing, because this army really doesn't have it. And I think that's one of the main reasons you got it. Again, spells, arguable right now, but it does get to reroll to cast rolls. So if you only roll a 6 or something, you really want it to go through, or you roll a 7, you really want it to go through, you can have a go at rerolls as well with it. So I think it's got some play. And likewise, the Vice Leader as well. Under normal circumstances, he's a 110-point wizard that's got a spell that lets you rerolls. Not the best spell in the world, but it is a reroll, and it is also a model that brings you a late game
130 points.
130, you know, yeah, nightmare. But it brings you a late game reroll, a late game Locus, as well, potentially. You know, when you can afford to get it in there and try to Locus something for another unit. That's maybe a thing. Yeah, we've got to get heroes from somewhere, right? And not every army we want 340-point ones in. So this is why these are all in the role players section. Somewhere you've got to get heroes, and when you look at that for 130 points, you'd rather spend 70 or 80 points more and have something that can actually do something like the Epitome or Celeste. And you don't really have any other choice, which is, again, why there is in the role play section. Similarly with the Mask is another one.
I think the pressure's been taken off heroes so much now, because the Fane can summon, though.
Yeah, but, like I said before, the problem with that is it's in a fixed location. You might not always get it where you want it, and your opponent knows where it is. And they can screen it out and all that. And so I when I put armies together, I want to use the Fane, but I also want some heroes as well. And obviously, you need. I just mean for generic reasons, command abilities, etc. We got to have some heroes in an army, like to be legal, and you don't always want to buy the big one.
They can move fast and summon as well. So yeah.
Likewise, the Mask. It's got some combat abilities, whatever. It's got a 4-up save. It's a 10 wound hero that brings a Locus and does kill a few things in combat, and is a little bit faster than your average unit. So that can also like stand in there as your Locus carrier. That's also your hero for doing stuff. It can go in Supreme Cyberites to pump up your command abilities, etc.
Move 10.
Yeah, another one in there, and he's one of the few actually cheap heroes as well, cheapish.
Yeah, cheapish.
The Shard Speaker as well struggled with whether to put this in the other category or the role players category, but he's 150 points, and he's got a spell which is a good one, but very short ranged, and he's got an ability which is a good one, but very short ranged as well. But he does bring two things, and I think you could argue, if his abilities were a bit longer ranged, I think it's a bit unnecessary being so short ranged. You could argue that as being worth 150 points, because we pay 110 points for models with one buff. So when you get models like this, or the Skink Wizards that have got a spell and an ability, you should pay a bit more points for them because they do two things. And I actually think, other than his range being so low, I actually don't think there's a lot wrong with this kind of model being 150 points. But the army is really expensive again, so it's a big ask. In the balance of the army, it's a hard thing. So I do think this will find its way into lists. I don't think that is a bad thing, but given its range on these abilities, it could certainly come down a little bit, I think. But again, if you're looking for heroes to fill in those hero spots to be in the army, this one could definitely go in there. The last one I'm going to mention is Chaos Marauders, because although Chaos Warriors are just better, right? They've got 10 wounds for 90 points with a 4-up save. At bigger points, they get rerolls. These are 160 points, and they get you 20 bodies. The problem with the Chaos Warriors is
charge ability to get somewhere and steal objectives and all
steal
that.
Objective, yeah. If the Chaos Warriors, if you're not taking the Chaos Warriors in 10s, they're significantly less value. And they're significantly less good. These give you a lot more bodies on the board for objective play that are better screened than Chaos Warriors, who don't cover a lot of board footprint. And yeah, they've got a bit of speed to try to do stuff with as well. So whilst I don't think these are as good as Chaos Warriors at all, and 160 points, because you've got to take them in 20s now, like with Goblins, it's a big chunk. If you get them in 10s for 80, these would be the best. These would be better than Chaos Warriors, probably, for the screen and roll. But they are good. I've got these in at least one list. Just to,
I like them. They didn't, not in the list that I put down, but I think they're good, yeah. Just again, shame to lose. Shame to not have the Hedonites abilities on them when they're a unit that is going to get about and do some fighting for you. So
yeah, definitely. Right, and now I've got a section to talk about next, which we're going to call Almost There, right? Now, this is a little bit speculation. The reason I want to include this is because obviously a lot of the questions people will ask are, why didn't you put this in your lists? Why didn't you consider this good enough? So I just want to talk about the things I haven't put in and why I haven't put in. But I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. And this also is a thing about sort of these units are nearly good. Right, there's like one of the interesting things about this book, I think, is that the book's actually, although a few Warscrolls, not mentioning any Slangors, were just super unimaginative and boring. Most of the stuff in the book is fine. It just needs a point cut. It's not like the Warscrolls are bad. Like Blissbarb Archers are a great Warscroll. They're just 30, 40 points overcosted, probably. Well, maybe not that much. And that, you can fix most of this book can be fixed with some points cuts. It would be quite a lot of points cuts, the likes of which we've never seen before. But and not all the units will get it. But if just a few of them get the points drops, the army will have a lot of options. Hero chariots are good. When the first Slaanesh book come out, I was running double keeper, double exalted Bladebringer chariot because their damage output's mental for their points. It's deceptive when you see a lot of very small attacks, but when you add them up and do the numbers, they're good. The exalted Bladebringers are my favorite. They do mortals on the charge, then more mortals again at the start of the combat phase. They do like 4 mortals, assuming they pass their rolls, to every unit they're in combat with, and then they get an attack buff. And they're throwing out they're easily throwing out like close to 30 dice. They also bring Locus and they bring Acquiescence to give you reroll ones to hit. They do a lot. They're just not quite fast enough. They got a very big base, which is a downside, but the 250 points, just not even close to viable. So, and all the hero chariots are similarly decent. They just scale down a bit. They need big points drops, like 50.
Have they gone up?
Yeah, they've gone up. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if they've gone up in the since before this book was released, but they did go up.
Okay.
At some point, I don't know what they ended on, but yeah, 250 for the exalted ones now, which is just crazy, like crazy points. But if these come down, like all of them across the hero chariot range, 50 points, they bring a lot. They bring the demon and the spell and all that, as well as the good attacks and the mortals. These could be good. And if these are the things that get the points cut, they could make the army really good. The non-hero chariots, not so much. Like, they could be also good if they come down in points, but they are never coming down enough points to make them viable. I very much doubt. Fiends, my opinion, just again, are a non-starter really. So their buff is very good, and their debuff in combat is very good, and obviously you can stack it up with other things in the army, notably Glutos, but they just don't have enough wounds. Like, they got 12 wounds in the unit for 180 points. Like, regardless of what negatives you put on them, there's a lot of investment to make that happen. And they just don't do enough. They don't cut the mustard. Their attacks are also acceptable for their points. And yes, they hit a bit harder if they hit a monster or something, but it's probably not really where you want them to be. So I think even if you're stacking up -1s, I would argue that these aren't good enough. And I would say that they need a points cut to be good. But if they do get that points cut, if they come down to like 160, I think they'll be playable. If they come down to 150, they'll probably be good. And then you'll start being able to do armies where your plan is like slam them into stuff and nothing can hit them properly. Also, obviously, needing 4 models in the unit to get the -1 to wound means you just very rarely going to keep that for very long, especially with so much shooting around, which their buffs don't work against. So these just aren't there for me. People are talking about them. Hopefully, I think it's a bit speculative. Seekers, likewise, if anyone in chat would like to throw out some reasons as to why this unit can ever in any universe or edition of the game justify 150 points, I would love to hear the reasoning. But these are nuts points for 150, which is a shame because, like, if these were 100, these would be solid battle. These would be solid battle line. They've got, crappy attacks, but they're fast. If they were 120, you'd probably take them, and it would enable some of the battalions, like the Seeker Cavalcade, to work as well. But they're just completely non-starters at 150. So if they come down, they open up a lot of the stuff in the army as well. Likewise, Hellstriders. These were my original favorite battle line when the book first came out because they were fast and well pointed. They could keep up with keepers, screen them, make sure people couldn't pile in with too much stuff to them, take objectives, etc. But they've just gone up too many points now. Yeah. So again, these really need to come down 20 or so points to give the army another valid battle line option. Sigvald, super interesting model, like 12 wounds with his save. He's got a 3-up save. His weapon's very accurate and has got 2 rend. He's got this incredible ability where he ignores ward saves, which is super naughty. And it's amazing because so many models in the game that have ward saves rely on that ward save to be worthwhile. and he gets +3 to his charges, so he's got a lot of potential to like go around things and get into heroes that really don't want Sigvald in them. He always strikes first in melee as well, so he's got that going for him too. And he's got potential, given, think about making him go twice with a keeper after he rolls, and not talking silly things like 10, but even if you roll like a 7 or an 8, gets a good chunk of attacks and he goes twice, he'll murder a lot of stuff. Probably not worth 250. Well, he's not worth 250 points to do that. But if he was 200, I could see him being quite good. And again, when you're looking at armies, heroes in your army, what heroes am I going to take if I'm not playing keepers? He could be a hero for 200 points. There was a Enrique Iglesias song in there somewhere. But yeah, and obviously his model's incredible as well. You want to play with him, so hopefully they make him viable. Like,
that's a good summary.
He's way better than Eltharion as well. Like, Eltharion is just not playable. When we're talking about those models in the same category, if you put him on the table at 250, I don't think you would be super insane. You certainly wouldn't be competitively optimal, but he at least does a thing that is really scarily good against some armies, which is cool. The Lord of Pain, again.
Him fighting twice is...
Yeah, him fighting twice is, especially being able to do it after he rolls that massive charge roll, is like kind of silly.
Yeah.
Lord of Pain. And as well, just throwing on top of that as well, he always strikes first, so he can get that fight twice in before anyone's gone as well, which is a big deal. Lord of Pain, really good buff, like reroll all hits. Powerful version of a reroll buff, only in melee, unfortunately, and he only works on the mortals. So, and he's 150 points, which is too many. But if you had a good target for this, you would probably pay 150 points for it grudgingly, as your one hero in your army. If he comes down in points and something else comes down in points that's worth buffing, Slick Blades basically, then he could be good.
Yeah,
but he's not quite right now. And Simbaresh Twin Souls, I'm going to talk about next. When you look at these, so they got 6 points of damage per model, right? No Ren, but 6 points of damage per model. That's 30 points of damage on 5 guys, right? And they move 8, which is nice.
Yeah, it's good.
And they've got 10 wounds and a 4-up save, which is better than most stuff in the army. And that's before you factor in their abilities. So they get a 5-up, they alternate a 5-up, feel no pain, and reroll on all the hit rolls. So they're actually, the Warscroll is set up to be solid. They're just too many points. I think at 150 points, the problem is they do a lot of damage for their points. So if you bring them down too much, they'll hit too hard. And they are quite fast. But I think if these come down 20...
Ren 0.
Yeah, what's that? Ren 0, yeah.
No, so.
Yeah. I think if these come down 20, they make up for it with sheer damage numbers, like 30 points of damage. If these come down 20, they'll be playable. And then suddenly that opens up a bunch of things you can do with the army, which is cool. If they come down 30, they'll be actively good. So, I mean, they're certainly not now. You can't pay 170 points for 10 wounds. With a 5-up feel no pain that you might not get when people shoot you turn 1 because it doesn't go off till your hero phase. So, Slick Blades last. I'm going to talk about these last. I'm very surprised to see the chat so excited about these today because they are not good. 5 attacks per model, of which 3 of them have got a rend and they're 3s and 3s. And they've still got that lovely wound ratio that these Seekers have got, but they're 20 points more for some reason. I don't see any situation you'd ever take these over Seekers, really. Like, the only interaction that's any good is making them fight twice with a keeper. But they're not a great unit, and they are big cavalry bases, so getting more than 10 in is not always easy. They go up to 15. So they just don't hit that hard. Even making them fight twice, they don't hit that hard. And you've got to pay points for the privilege and lose the guns on the Blissbarb Archers. If these were Battle Line and the Archers weren't, definitely an argument to use them right now. But I just don't see why you would ever take these over Blissbarb Archers right now. Like, there's like zero situations where you bother. What's that? Blissbarb Seekers, sorry, yeah. You definitely, Blissbarb Seekers.
I bugged them in was the Seeker Cavalcade,
yeah.
and the 6-inch piling, right? And they got a 2-inch melee. So we're talking about engineered situations earlier. I was, and the same with the Hellstriders with the 3-inch reach, but the 2-inch reach attack on the Striders is actually decent.
It's a real attack.
It's got a point of end. Yeah. So I thought, obviously the keeper goes in, we resolve our Locus.
Yeah.
And the opponent unit did that unit can't pile in.
Yeah.
And then it opens up the chance to use the 6-inch piling, go in, 2 away. I've got a 2-inch reach. The unit I'm picking on's got a 1-inch reach. I attack and they never attack me back. And I thought I liked that. And particularly if I liked that maybe they had multiple options, it was like, okay, that's unit I really want to get, but I can't really tangle with them. But if the keeper goes off, then I'll tangle. If not, I'll go 6 this way and batter 10 skinks, or whatever again, or just get out of there, and tag onto some other little unit. That's what I thought that there was. Yeah.
And obviously they've got play, whereas we were talking about the archers before, you run down a flank, you go and fight some unit of 10 things that's holding the objective or whatever. Slick Blades will do that better because they'll be able to actually get on the objective and fight the things and kill it if it's something small. But I just don't see that sequence of things that you just described there. It's just too much setup for not enough payoff.
I don't know. I don't think that's that bad, lad.
Right? Like it's a lot of setup. Like you've got to get a keeper in. You've got to pass your Locus roll to not lose your keeper, and you're piling in a unit that for 200 points gets 50 in attacks, 3s and 3s.
Yeah, look, the unit's points and what it does is a little bit underwhelming, but we're in almost there now, right? And what's to say that it doesn't need to resolve the Locus? What's to say that the sequencing just means that unit's had to fight?
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. That's a thing. That's definitely a thing with them. But is all of that
piling is normally good?
Is all of that and the fact you need to do all that better than just having a bow?
Well, the problem is it's 140 points for that. Then I've got to buy a whole battalion. I've got to buy those units for 200 points. So when I ultimately look at it, no.
And the bows.
We're almost there. What if they're cheaper?
Yeah, that's what I mean. If these were 20 points cheaper, you'd have a contention between those two new Exalted Cavalry units, but they're not. And again, that's why I think these are almost there, but not quite. I think realistically, they probably need to be 170 or something, because they just don't hit hard enough. And yet, the tricks and all that are nice, but a unit should stand on their own merits at least a little bit, because if they get charged or if they can't use that trick or whatever, they're just a non-entity. Well, they're still 20 wounds for 200 points, which is not awful, and they're very fast. But yeah, I think if I did have these in my role players list, and then I moved them down, and I moved them up and down. I did go back and forth on this, so I certainly think you could argue that these are better than I'm giving them credit for. But when you're list building, again, points are so tight because the army's a bit over nerfed. The 20 points is a big deal, especially when you're taking more than one unit of them.
What we need is some hero on an Exalted Seeker to come out that makes them battle line.
We do really need that. Yeah, that would be good. Right, and then we're gonna then last section now before we start talking about some other bits about the army is the bin. Right, this is the section of the book that is just never going to work. Anything can work if it gets discounted enough, but these units are never going down enough to make them playable. Slangor Fiendbloods, no survivability. They hit like a wet paper towel. They only bring 3 models for objectives. They aren't battle line. So I like to do what ifs. I like to say, right, if this unit was 80 points, would I take it? And I was like, nah. Right. So how are you ever going to consider taking it? And they're never going down to 80. They don't have enough wounds. They hit like a wet paper towel. They got no special rules worth anything, unfortunately. I have ordered a box of 3 of these, though, to use in a different game because I think the models are incredible, which is the good thing about free will. A little bit meta. Myrmidesh Painbringers, very similarly. They hit like a wet paper towel as well. 10 attacks, 3s and 3s, Ren 1. Is like 80-point battle line level of attacks, 90-point unit level of attacks. It's not very good at all. And they only bring 10 wounds. They got a 4-up save. And they've got a reroll in melee, which is nice. But, Chaos Warriors basically do all this. The only difference is they're not Hedonites, but Chaos Warriors do all this, and they get to reroll their saves against shooting as well. So whilst, I would maybe pay 100 points for these, take a decent sized unit to them, the ability to fight twice from Hedonites, etc. But really, if you were taking a big unit of these where you would bother making them fight twice, you would rather just be Chaos Warriors and have your rerollable save. So I can't see a situation where these would ever be good on their own merits, and certainly not while Chaos Warriors exist, unless they come down to, obviously 60 points or some dumb number, which is just not happening. Non-hero chariots, I can't see these ever being playable. The hero ones are just too good, for all the things they bring that the non-hero ones don't.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, some of them, 50, 80, and in the cases of the lowest end chariots, 90 points overcosted by my sort of vague numbers. The numbers that these are overcosted by is dumb. So I think if you were playing Godseekers where you get the battle line chariots, if they come down in some points and the other battle line didn't, you might get an argument for running 3 of them as your battle line. In some situations, maybe, which could be a thing, but I just find it very unlikely. And then last of all, the Infernal Enrapturous. What's going on with that model now? 150 points for a bad ranged attack and a debuff that is okay, but she's 150 points. If she was 80, would you take her as anything other than filler? I don't even know that you would take that model if she was 80.
Yeah, she's not good.
No. For that point, you get a command ability, or you get a wizard, or you get a priest buff. She's got none of them.
Yeah, nothing.
She's just not happening anymore, which is a shame because I've got 3 of them in my loft. From when I might have wanted to summon them, Mike Wilson style, at some point.
Yeah.
So yeah, those units are probably not going to be doing anything competitively at any point, which is a real shame for the Myrmidesh Painbringers, because they could have been the battle line that the army needed, in my opinion. Gabe is asking, is the only pain they bring the pain they bring on themselves? The answer is no, because they effectively don't exist. So they bring no pain nor pleasure, because we're just going to pretend they're not there. Non-Hedonites choices now. Let's have a little talk over some of these ones. Chaos Warriors we've talked about, super important for this army. Yes, I think. Yes. Right now, Chaos Marauders also a good choice.
Mm-hmm.
Chaos Knights, another very aggressively costed unit. Now that I've talked about before, 160 points, hit really hard on the charge. They're basically just better than Slick Blade Seekers numerically. Obviously, you can't do your piling tricks and everything with them. But, if you want a unit that's going to go and hit things, that moves fast, keep up with your army, there's an option in there potentially as well. They've just got very good numbers for their points. 15 wounds.
Exploding 6s and all that. I don't know if it's...
Well, no, they lose the exploding 6s, but they're 15 wounds cavalry with a 4-up save for 160 points. Just raw numbers, they're good. No, they're not battle line. They're battle line in Slaves of Darkness, unfortunately. But they're just a good, solid unit that may be there. Other things as well, the Slaves to Darkness units that buff these Slaves to Darkness units are obviously also viable in Slaanesh, like the War Shrine or the Sorcerer, who will get a mortal spell as well. Depraved Drove from the Beast of Chaos book. Now, I think this is too expensive, so it's 460 points to get the hero and 3 battle line out of it. So at that point, you could have taken 3 units of Painbringers and would be better than 3 units of 10 Ungors, for battle line choices kind of thing. So they're not this. I don't think this is really good. Although I do think there is maybe a thing where Ungor Raiders are very good. As I've talked about lots of times in the past, and you can put them in this battalion as well. So you could take 3 units of Ungor Raiders, which gives you a really nice screen that advances pre-game, and it's also got shooting to contribute to depravity as well. You need to do 1 wound to a unit with them. So there's maybe a thing there, but I think it just eats up too many points for what it does.
This is the type of thing you want to use maybe if you want to make yourself a load of depravity by running cheap units over as well, isn't it? So
yeah, I mean, the problem with them cheap units is they don't tend to still be alive to generate depravity as well. They're too cheap and too easy to kill. And then there's the Pleasure Bound Warband from Slaves to Darkness as well. That is 1+6 units. So it's 1 Slaves to Darkness Slaanesh hero and 6 Slaves to Darkness Slaanesh units, which I think is okay. 160, it's a bit overcosted, but you can get your battle line in there. You can get a hero in there. It can keep your drops down if that's a thing you want to do. So, you know, that's okay. Someone's mentioning in the chat about maybe my points were off on the Depraved Drove there, but yeah, maybe that's off by a few points, but it's still quite expensive for what you get when you could just take 3 units of 5 Chaos Warriors as your battle line. Really, in my opinion. So that's I think, oh yeah, and Everchosen, of course, there's the last thing. So there's 2 Slaanesh options in Everchosen that were not really that good before, that may be sort of good now.
Lurid Haze is pretty cool.
Pick my book up here. So yeah, so Lurid Haze was always the one that was like considered to be a little bit like, well, that was the playable one. Really, out of 3 was Lurid Haze. You get to read. What's that? Sorry.
Redeploy as a D3 units.
Yeah, you get to redeploy D3 units. You get to reroll run rolls as a command trait, which is kind of good because a lot of the army can run and shoot, run and charge, etc. So that's quite a good thing. The command ability gives you +1 to saves for units, which is decent, but you know, it makes them a 4+ instead of a 5+. So still kind of okay. And the artifact is +1 wounds. The artifact's not very good, but because of the way Slaanesh work, it's only the artifact that really takes something off you here. Invaders, though, not the best host. You know, Godseekers is by far and away the best host. You know, even if you only get its ability off once, it generates like double the depravity of all the other ones on average, and the +1 to charge rolls is easily the best ability as well. I think Pretenders for the reroll ones would be good if it affected shooting, but it doesn't. So Godseeker is very good. So the downside to this is you have to take Invaders to play it. And obviously you lose your command trait and your artifact. But, you know, it's interesting for the +1 save, potentially. It uses command points, though, so it, you know, you'd have to be, like, not running Keepers probably to get your value out of that.
Yeah.
And interestingly, something I think is potentially decent now is the Scarlet Cavalcade. So this is the Godseekers one. Which is kind of interesting. So the ability in this is when you've got 2 friendly units of 10 or more models within 6 of each other, you can do 1 charge roll to charge them both. So if you are going to try charging with, you know, like whatever unit it is that you're going to try charging, it can like save your command point here and there. It's kind of it's always been an interesting ability. Probably just doesn't really do enough until the army actually wants to charge lots of stuff in. But, you know, it can be good with Keepers doing like long range charges or whatever. You get to spend 1 command point to reroll a charge for both of them.
Does Sigvold increase the charge bonus on him and someone else?
That's a really good shout. I'm going to look up his wording now. So you make 1 charge roll to determine the charge distance for both, and then depending on how Sigvold's worded, that could be a thing. Let's check it out. What do you reckon, chat? Are you gonna before I get to look this up? What do you think?
I think I never liked this one. I didn't think when I looked at the Everchosen books, I thought that Lurid Haze could be all right, but I don't know. I wasn't so keen on this one. But
keen on this,
isn't it? I felt because is it got something to do with Seekers?
Yeah, we'll carry on going. I'll get back to it now. I've found them. Add 3 to charge rolls for this model. So I think that there is no way for us to know how that interacts without an FAQ. Because, you know, it says 1 charge roll to determine the charge distance for both. So I think likely he'd get +3 and the other one would probably be my rule. And if I had to rule this now, but you know, that would be fun, wouldn't it? If it did work. Sigvold and a Keeper won't get him +3. It's got a command ability where you pick a Godseeker's host unit. Any save of a 6, the attacker takes a mortal wound. Now, I kind of like this because a lot of the time you might be putting units of Blissbarb Archers, Blissbarb Seekers into stuff, which gives you 20 wounds worth of stuff that someone's got to go through in order to kill your unit. And that means a lot of save rolls. So these kind of reflection abilities, you got 10 models, they're all going to be dead before they, you know, reflect a lot. But when you got 20 wounds of stuff to get through, you could actually do some reasonable amount of mortals with this, potentially. Stuff could have to attack you twice, and for a command point, it might do, 5, 6 mortals back to something, which is quite a lot of wounds. The command trait as well lets you reroll battle shock tests, which, if you're not running keepers, the command traits in Godseekers aren't really doing a lot for you. So it's not a big loss to have to take that. And then the artifact is +1 bravery for Godseeker's host within 12 of the bearer as well, which is also a good thing that you do kind of want, because particularly, again, when you're running them Seekers, losing a couple of models can easily, a bad battle shock roll can lose you a whole 4 wounds. So the bravery things are actually good and are actually a thing that Godseekers do want. And the command ability can be useful as well. So I actually think that you don't lose a lot to take the Scarlet Cavalcade if you're doing that kind of army, and I do think it could be sort of decent and worth considering, because ultimately, if you weren't going to use the artifact and command ability anyway, it's sort of free. So that makes that really interesting and definitely playable for all those battle shock reasons I just mentioned. Just good on those units. So that's definitely worth considering. And again, it's in the best host, which makes it good.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the non-Hedonites things I'm going to go through. So let's do some summaries on the pros of army construction in this book. Right. What does this book do that's good?
Yeah.
It's fast.
Yes.
Being fast in Age of Sigmar is a big deal. You can have armies that are very powerful but slow, and realistically limits how much they can win games. Like Fyreslayers as a massive example. One of the most bent combat and survivability armies that's ever existed, only kept in check by how slow it is.
Yeah.
And this is, this army is basically the opposite. One of the least bent combat armies that's probably existed, but it's super fast, and that alone can win you games. Do stuff properly.
It's been getting outshone by Deep Striking and whatnot, though, hasn't it? Speed recently, but
yeah. And yeah, on that topic, the next thing is that it's got access to shooting, right? And although that is becoming more common, and some other armies do it better, it's got access to shooting, and that in itself is a big deal in Age of Sigmar, because shooting is powerful, and that's a good thing. The summoning is flexible and powerful and keeps them from being too one-dimensional, because it adds some tricks to the army. Like, the army doesn't really have a lot of tricks, like we were saying before. It's basically a fast melee army with some archers in. Just do a lot other than that. The summoning adds a dimension to the army, something to keep your opponent thinking, and something to keep you thinking about as well, to make sure you're hitting that 12 or at least the 9 or 10 every turn. Yeah. And then Locus, although we discussed before that it's gone up and down in certain ways, it can make some super one-sided combats, which is, some games of Age of Sigmar, all you need is one heavily one-sided combat, and then you've won the game, or pseudo won the game off one heavily one-sided combat, and that's a very powerful thing to have access to. Cons to the army. Let's not make any bones about it. Everything in this book, most things in this book, are generally horribly overcosted. And the army has also got very poor battle line options. Like when you play these armies like Lumineth, where your battle line are also units you were going to take anyway, or Daughters of Cain or anything like that, it's just great. And when you play these armies where you've got to burn 300 points on battle line you don't really want, you're in a hole from the start. And that can often be the difference between a tier 1 and tier 2 book, is just what's battle line and not, especially with so many battle line related mission objectives as well. So that is going to hold them back quite a lot until some points changes happen to give them acceptable battle line, unless you're doing Chaos Warrior related things. Not much variety in the good units. There wasn't many in my key Warscrolls section before. No. Even if you have a different opinion and think there should be a couple more in there, maybe, there's still not that many. So a lot of the armies you're going to make are going to be like spamming a lot of the same units or using a lot of the same units. And the good units that they do have often just overlap in what they do anyway, so it's a bit boring. So like Shalaxi or Keepers, or which mage are we taking, or which random buff character are we taking? or the guys on horses. It's the same kit twice if you were going to run slick blades or whatever. You're not getting a lot of variety out of stuff in the army, although to be fair, you could say that for most good competitive armies anyway. It's the way these games work. Vulnerable to shooting, which is particularly prevalent right now.
Very
yeah. But, unlike a lot of armies, they do also have the answer to shooting built in, which is to charge them really fast.
Yeah.
Or which is to, one of the things shooting armies hate is stuff they can't shoot before it gets to them. And when they kill a bunch of your stuff and you summon a Keeper of Secrets and then roll an 8 on the charge, that can also be a game.
So shooting armies often can't tear through more than 2,000 points, particularly when an army like Slaanesh is fast enough to threaten them and get hold of some of it. So,
maybe. And we've got access to our own shooting, which is fast enough that, depending on the army you're playing against, it could our shooting in the Seekers could backline itself turn 1, be out of range of getting shot against a lot of armies, and then just fast enough to then get into range to shoot as well. So it, as well as being vulnerable, it's also got the answers too, which not every army has, which is interesting. Poor wound to point ratios on most models. So having good wounds for your points is like a necessity generally to be a good army in these games. And this army hasn't got it, and it's got weak saves on top, and not many sort of like global defensive buffs. The exception being the Seekers, obviously the Bliss Barbs, which do get 10 wounds for 90 points, which is a really good rate, even with a 5-up save. So that's kind of cool. And yet, unreliable defensive tech, which I've obviously just mentioned, they have got a little bit, but maybe not that great. And then finally, they're just bad in a stand-up fight, and they're bad at holding ground, which is literally the way you win games of Age of Sigmar, is getting stuff on objectives and keeping it there.
We're not talking about high model count armies here remotely either. No.
So. Yeah, you might get 20 wounds for them, 180 points of Seekers, but you only get 5 models.
You put some Demonettes on later, maybe you'd be all right. So
yeah. So they're bad at that. So it forces you to play differently. It forces you to run models around the board, shooting stuff, picking stuff off. Maybe like applying all your firepower to one side of the board and taking those objectives with your fast units, refusing to engage with other enemy units, which isn't always possible if they're faster than you or have guns. The way this army has to play to win the game is quite complicated and involves a lot of thought. Your summoning's got to keep you on the board while you're losing attrition. Are you going to be able to out-attrition the opposing army? Are you going to be able to outflank them? What's the mission? Is it the kind of thing where you can sneak in behind them with your fast units? If it's one where you're fighting over the center of the board, you won't be able to do that even against bad armies. What are you going to do instead? And that's definitely a con to play in this army in general. But if you like a challenge,
you have to save up your summoning as well. It's tough, isn't it? You have to. You probably won't have a lot of time to spend it, will you? You don't want to be going into turn 3 and you've got 16 depravity or whatever, do you? Or 20 or something. You're like, damn.
There's a lot of choices in the army which I do like. If you've got, let's say you've got 8 depravity, you've got to judge next turn whether, even though it's inefficient to spend 8, are you going to spend that now because you're going to have 12 next turn anyway,
or 6 of it or whatever? And
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's a lot of choices in the army, and it's interesting. That's one of the things I like about it, is that there's a lot of things you can do to affect it yourself. So let's look at some army lists then.
Yeah,
let's look at some lists. As ever, these are mostly sort of indicative, maybe not tweaked to the max, because obviously we've written a lot of them to try and get through different kind of themes and things that you might do. And there's only so many we can talk about, or we'd be here for hours. But, as a general rule, I think for this, you can assume most of these are God Seekers.
Yes.
Because the depravity generator, again, even if you just get it off once, is better than the others. And it's generally got better abilities, etc. Spells wise,
we need someone to make it to do work for us.
And plus 1 charge. It's just so good.
Yeah.
Spells wise, you can assume that the Dark Delusions from the Mortal Law, which is the one that gives +1 to hit if you beat the Bravery, is on most things. Keepers generally running a mix of heals and the Fly spell, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's generally, the kind of stuff we're looking at. So let's look at some army compositions, which we got to put up on screen. So the first one, this is a list that is designed to put a couple of bricks of pretty tough stuff on the board and back it up with a bunch of Bliss Barb Seekers. You've got Gluthos or Scullion to give a -1 to hit, which I think Chaos Warriors are tough enough that they benefit enough from a -1 to hit to make it worthwhile, which is kind of good. He's also a caster. He's also bringing a model that does a bit more damage in the midfield and all that kind of stuff as well. Behind that, you've got 5 units of Bliss Barb Seekers. Their job, as I would see it in this army, depending on what you're playing, yes, they can provide range fire support, but they're not the most efficient. They don't do the most damage in the world at doing that. They might spread for the gravity, where that's a thing that you want to do, or they might pick off key targets. Turn 1, because Chaos Warriors are slow, they might go and edge center field objectives, and then turn 2 just run away. So it means you get to take the objectives turn 1, which not every army can do still in Age of Sigmar. And we can take all of them because we've got 5 units. We can take everything.
You can chance you're going to get given first turn, right? So you want to be sure you can score.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if you want to run out in front of, this army also, compared to some of the ones we're going to look at, isn't actually that high drop. Like, it's 9. There's armies that go away. It's not like a blowout drop where you're always second. You probably get 1 or 2 in an event on average. And of course, them Seekers can go and flank if people don't defend the flank. So it gives some mobility and options to an army which has just got a brick in the middle of the board, which is a reasonable thing to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And you could definitely take Gluthos out of this and replace it with other stuff if you were of the mind. But I think he does work quite well with the Chaos Warriors.
Yeah, he works well with those 2 bricks. They're going to be there, center board. It's cool, man.
Yeah, I think it's decent. And there's a unit of Bliss Barb Archers in there as well, as the 3rd battle line, which is just again what I was saying earlier. I don't like spending 90 points on a unit of Chaos Warriors. That's a do nothing unit for the whole game, and it would have left 70 odd points to not really spend on anything. You could have maybe took an endless spell, but I'm not a fan of endless spells right now, as I mentioned. So basically, they are there. They are a key war scroll. They add a bit more shooting to your army when there would have been nothing better to do with those points on the battle line. On the question being asked in chat now, Doze Green's asking, are the Warriors having spears? Halberds, you mean, obviously. The maths on these generally is that so the halberds are 3s and 4s rather than 3s and 3s. Still no Ren, but they got a 2-inch reach. The maths on these is if you get 11 Chaos Warriors in with hand weapons, it's the same as if you'd got all 15 of them in if you'd given them halberds. So it's basically a wash. But as soon as you start losing models from the unit, when you definitely got the unit in, the melee weapons take over. The 1-inch weapons take over really quickly. Extra benefit to this is you don't have to convert them all because they come with hand weapons. So the hand weapons are just better. There's no circumstance, even with 20 models in the unit, if you do that, there's no circumstance mathematically where the swords aren't better. And they're only on 32 mils. They're not that bad. You easily get 12, 13 of these in most of the time. They get +1 to charges, don't forget as well. So they do all right. So yeah, I'd never run anything on these. I'd never run the halberds on these, personally. So that's the first army list to look at. Next one is, so I posted a couple of lists up on Twitter last week randomly with 3 or 4 keepers in, etc. Obviously refine them a little bit now. This is a list if you want to run a bunch of monsters. I think it's a decent list. So it's 3 keepers of secrets. Obviously, we're in God Seekers. It's Gluthos or Scullion as well. We're making an assumption here that his heal works the way we think it does, which is you just get a lot of wounds back when you overkill a unit. It also makes some keepers a bit more survivable because they, between their heals or their shields, depending on which way you go, and a -1 to hit, they suddenly, if they live on a couple of wounds, you get the heal off. For Gluthos, it combos out quite well. And then a unit of 10 Chaos Warriors, 5 Chaos Warriors, and 20 Chaos Marauders. And they're there just because this unit's got no screen footprint at all. So you really needed something a bit bigger to fill up a chunk. And then that's in Supreme Cyberites as well. So this is a bit more classic style. 4-drop. Let you pick the first turn depending on how you want it to go. Loads of spells to be thrown out. Loads of unbinds to be thrown at these armies that are casting spells. Good command point generation. Good command point abilities. And I think in this one, assuming your keepers weren't dying at a rate of too many keepers quickly, you'd really want to be summoning them 30 Demonette units. Get them in there, start killing a bunch of stuff, summon 30 Demonettes to really back them up with some chonk on the board. And then even if you do go down to one keeper, you've got 30 Demonettes to double up. I think this will be quite good. I think the keeper monster list is alive and well. And this is definitely playable. Again, Godseekers, likely to be my favorite command ability is the reroll hits and wounds of 1. When you charge at one of your keepers, so that would be on one of them. And I think artifact wise, you'd probably have the cameo on a different keeper, which you're going to throw to the Fane on turn 1, classic style. Bonus to that, by the way, you take a mortal wound off at your generated depravity as well when you do that.
I like that.
Good chance to get an extra command points every turn from Supreme Cyberites. And also, as well, probably the Girdle of the Realm Racer on one of them, which gives you loses your wound but gives you fly, which is all right. So I think that's a good list if you're into the keepers, which I definitely still am. Next list, next couple of lists. So these are Chaos Warrior centric ones, really. The list that we've got up, I'm going to go on for people who are watching on the video. I'm going to start with the right. Glutas or Scullion, 20 Chaos Warriors with shield, 20 with shield, 5 with shield, and then 4 Blissbarb Seeker units as well, which is kind of similar to the one that we did first. This is just added in more Chaos Warriors at the expense of some Blissbarb Seekers, but you also get a command point for your turn 1, which is, maybe a bit brickier, bit less stuff going on, but is pretty decent. Mm-hmm. We've also got one which is attempting to make the Chaos Warriors kill things, which I think is reasonable. So it's a Chaos Lord who makes things fight twice. It's 20 and 15 Chaos Warriors, both with 2-handed weapons. So they've actually got the Ren now. And then 2 units of 5 Chaos Warriors. We've got up on screen here with 2-handed weapons, but maybe shields on the little ones potentially. But then we've got 2 Chaos War Shrines, which are, if you've ever read this War Scroll, it's bonkers good. It makes Chaos units reroll all hits and wounds on a 3-up. It also gives them all a 6-up feel no pain as well. So in addition to that brickiness that they've got going on there, they've got decent attacks. They can go twice, reroll all the hits and wounds, really pushes them into solidity. 3 units of Blissbarb Seekers to back these up as well. So we've still got that something in the army that actually goes and actively does something, which I think is what Chaos Warriors needed to be good. And this is all in a Pleasure Touch warband, which if some stuff dies, they get to pile in 6, which helps with the short range of all these Chaos Warriors as well. And it makes the army 4-drop, and I think this is super interesting because the good thing about all these Chaos Warrior brick armies, they don't go anywhere quickly and they always do damage, which means they're always generating depravity. So if your opponent wants to come and fight you off the objectives, which he's got to, you're replacing them. I'd maybe not replacing, you're not summoning the keepers in this one because they've got nothing to make go twice, but you're probably just starting to replace them Chaos Warriors with units of 30 Demonettes, or maybe some chariots or something to stop people piling in, some smaller demon heroes, get them early, stop some pile-ins, Chaos Warriors go to town. Or whatever. So I think these are quite good. And if you like them Slaves to Darkness models that came out a couple of years ago, which are really, really good new kits, this might be the home for them where you get to actually play them and paint them pink, which will look sweet.
Nice.
The next one is this one now is just trying to really streamline and sort of trim the fat on some of these armies. So this is 2 Keeper of Secrets and Shalaxi, and then 3 units of 5 Chaos Warriors and 4 units of 5 Blissbarb Seekers. So again, this is another keeper list. This comes in 1980, so it's a good example of where dropping Shalaxi being a bit cheaper makes the list actually fit because she saves you 30 points. You got 3 units of Chaos Warriors to sit on objectives, be a bit of a screen. You got 4 units of Blissbarb Seekers, which against a lot of armies will need to be a screen for the keepers. But that's sort of okay. But they also provide some shooting to add to the army as well. Is this the best version of the three keepers list? I don't know. Is it even a good list? It's really hard to say whether the triple keeper lists are going to be able to keep up in the shooting meta. Really. I don't know, but this is certainly a way to fit all those things in and try it. And this is something I'll be trying, because I mean I've got this army, so this is the kind of thing I want to try for sure. Moving on a little bit now to some a little bit more speculative, including some stuff we've said is maybe not quite good enough. So this is using in Wrath of the Everchosen Scarlet Cavalcade in Seeker Cavalcade now. So this has got 2 units, 2 Keeper of Secrets to do the Keeper of Secrets thing, run around and chomp stuff. 3 Hellstriders with Claw Spears, which hit. Okay, that they can kill small things, do a bit of damage, and then 20 Blitzbarb Seekers split across a 10-5-5 because we're maxed in the battalion, and then a Seeker Cavalcade. So this has got 2 keepers to kill stuff. It's got some archers, and then it's got a few melee guys who can do them 6-inch piling tricks. It would be nice to have bigger units on these, but the Hellstriders, you can't justify spending the points on them to make them bigger. But I think you could argue it. If you took like a keeper out and just had 1 keeper, made them Hellstrider units bigger, you get to do the 6-inch piling tricks we were talking about before. You get to make them go twice, etc. You could also certainly move things around in here to get Slick Blades in, if you really think that them piling tricks are worth it, which I definitely don't. The Hellstriders only just make it because the battle line. But it is 3 drops. Does give you some control over that area of the game. Certainly a bit tight in what it's got on the board, just because of the points cost of so many of them things. Definitely maybe a little bit light. But, I could certainly see this being a sort of one-dayer style list you'd maybe give a run out of. And with a few points drops, you could fit some interesting stuff into these Seeker Cavalcades.
I wrote the same basic list, because we're going to move into 2 lists that I've wrote now, a bit of a different take on it with a lot less thought than Ian's put in as well. But I've done the same thing. I've done the 2 keepers, but I did have 1 big unit of 10 fighting ones. I wanted another
Slick Blades.
No, one of the Hellstriders.
Oh, the Hellstriders, yeah, with the claw spears, yeah.
I wanted to have another target for the keepers, another unit that could make fight twice with it as well. I had 3 units of 5 Blitzbarb Seekers, and I bought an Endless Spell, which I had put in all my lists as well, so which I can talk about more on the next one. But yeah, I thought that this maybe was okay. I think I wanted a big unit of fighting ones because I wanted one that could really be aggressive and use the 6-inch piling, and some more targets for keepers. So,
yeah. I mean, I could certainly see dropping a keeper out of that list, because the 1 keeper would have a target, which is you bump up your Hellstriders. Like you make 2 of the Hellstriders 10, or you make 1 of them 10 and take some more Blitzbarb Seekers. So you're getting them in there, and then your 2 drop. You really have got that control over turn 1.
Maybe you can afford some Slick Blades then as well, or something.
Yeah, exactly. There's a bunch of ways you can go with that. I don't honestly think that the things that this does are powerful enough, really, to be great. But you could also play this in Lurid Haze as well, if you wanted to move away from the Godseekers.
I don't know. I think
just get a bit of feedback off your phone there, Richie. I think.
Oh, it's someone's ringing the shop phone on silent.
It's a classic.
Yeah, the classic site feedback. It's still take a bunch of Blitzbarb Seekers in, which is what most of these lists are about. Yeah, it's just soft, squishy battle line, really. But I don't know what's more to say about 3 units of 5 Chaos Warriors, though. And some of these. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's that problem with the battle line, isn't it? You can't have 300 points of your army not contributing, and they do contribute by sitting on backfield objectives to some extent, which is fine. But really, you don't want 3 units doing that. You want 1. And then you want the other 2 to be things that are fighting. So the army's disadvantaged from the start by having to pay for weak battle line, and then everything's really expensive on top. And that's the only problem the book's really facing, though. You fix them points values and the battle line units, and then you unleash it and it goes.
I just need to say, it's a bunch of Blitzbarbs. It's 2 keepers, but another unit that fights that's not keepers. That third is not a keeper, and I've got all these fast cavalry and I can do the pile and six things, which can cause people a lot of bother on that. So maybe.
Yeah.
So some I've put together. It's interesting because I've read through the show what Ian's put together for us, which has been great. But I've independently looked at some stuff myself, so a bit off a lot of what Ian said before here. So here's what I've put together. So Glutus and one keeper, which I talked about in the start of the show. I thought that I didn't want to buy two keepers. I wanted two heroes. So I thought Glutus, Keeper of Secrets. I've liked the fly spell, but I love retreat charge. I love the opponent not being able to retreat, So I've brought all those angles in rather than him just being, reroll ones to hit and wound. So I've gone that way with this. I've took Blitzbard Archers because I haven't got anywhere near the number of Seekers that Ian has got in his list. So my battle line of Blitzbard Archers to bring in the option to shoot and split fire and gain some extra points around that way. I'm getting some echo off you as well, Lee. Then I've got a unit of 20 Demonettes. So I have bought some. The battle line, and I've bought a unit that I hope can do some fighting for me. I don't think they're as bad as you think, really, or I just really don't love 5 Chaos Warriors.
I don't think they're bad either. At all, especially when you can make them go twice. I think they're okay. They're really bad against shooting because shooting will just take them off the table. But look, the entire army is bad against shooting, so you could also just say whatever. If I play shooting, it's probably going to be bad anyway. And it depends what you're getting as well, doesn't it? If you take those out, you're going to get 10 more Blitzbard Archers and 60 points spare, or you're going to get a unit of Chaos Warriors and 130 points. But what you really do with 130 points? Yeah. Just on its own, because the army's expensive. So I don't think they're unviable at all. I think they're okay.
Yeah, and five guys on board is just nothing to me. It's just a nothing unit, But anyway, and they get all the benefits from the sixes, the exploder, and it can fight twice, like we said. So I've got 2 into Blitzbard Seekers, but obviously I've invested a little bit more in the archers here. But 2 into Blitzbard Seekers is quite low, and I took some fiends. So I don't mind these. Are they weak to shooting? Yes. But I look at everything in my army and I think just the same thing, right? So, but they work really well with Glutos and they get to fight twice. I was looking at their damage versus 30 Demonettes or something, and the damage it's very close. It's a touch less, but it's super close. Their wounds, they get close to the same wounds as well. And they -2 to hit in combat. Hopefully they've got enough models that they're going to be -1 to wound in combat as well if they're well protected. So I didn't mind them. So I took some fiends in this army. So that was the first one I put together.
Do you think since you're going in on the fiends, just thinking about the Demonettes, would you maybe go drop the Demonettes down to something else that would add some battle line, maybe a 20 Marauders and fit Geminids in to go with the fiends? Maybe that's a fair choice. Yeah, well, that could be a good little change out there, and just push that even further. Because I guess in this one I've avoided taking the endless spells because I am aware of what you're saying, and I thought some of the same, how much use am I ever going to get out of these things, when I pay a load of points for them. So yeah, definitely. So the next one is more seekers, right? So I've got the keeper just as settled before, Glutos just as settled before. Got a bunch more Demonettes in this one. Still got me 20 and me 2 10s as battle lines. 4 units of Blitzbard Seekers, so I'm all in with them. But then I've got the Mirror. Yeah. Or the Suffering Greatide, or the Burning Head. I was a bit unsure on where to go with that last one. I think maybe the Burning Head's best here. Look, I want to generate depravity with this list. I think Blitzbard Seekers are a really good target for early depravity to make sure that you are getting yourself something on turn 2. I will happily run my Burning Head through all those units of Blitzbard. And you won't lose a model because it only does D3. Yeah, maybe I'll do 1 wound to some of them, and it's nothing, right? Still got a 3 wound model sat there. The keeper's going to do his thing on the Fane, and then the Mirror is hopefully in the opposing army then, and that's causing them bother on their turn. So hopefully
between those 2 turns. Obviously I go out and shoot a load of their stuff. Then I make 5 on my turn 1 in my hero phase. And then I can use the mirror to maybe generate me some as well. The thing is, what I'd like, I don't think I've got that in any of these lists, is an aggressive endless spell that in the hero phase, like Geminids, let's say, the Geminids goes out and does its hero phase thing. I get it off, right? It hits X amount of units, let's say a lot of units, hopefully, or makes them really have to deploy bad to negate it, right? Maybe forces them back down the board a little bit as well. I like that my Seekers can then go into the shooting phase, not having to think about doing split fire.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I don't want to go into shoot. If I can go into shooting phase, I've already hit 5 units, right? I've generated 5 extra depravity. My keeper's burnt 1 or something. I'm sat on 6 depravity. Then I can go, right, my Seekers are going to actually concentrate on that unit and try and kill that unit, instead of having to do all this random nonsense for splitting fire around. Yeah. So this was, I think I like this list maybe better than the other one, but I wasn't sure where I wanted to be with endless spells and if I want that aggressive one. So maybe the Demonists can drop and I can upgrade, one of these spells to something that is a bit more aggressive. Like the Mesmerizer Mirror maybe should always just be Geminids. I think I'd have to give it a lot more thought about what armies are in the meta, how those armies moved around the board, if it was going to cause my opponents any bother with on their turn, generating me depravity, right? Because what I'm talking about, if you don't work those, the mirror, when they move, if they don't move further away from it, they take mortal wounds. So again, it's more depravity for me.
A thing I do like about the mirror now with all the bliss barbs in the army is, if your bliss barbs go out to like a flank and you put the mirror in front of their army, the way you work around the mirror on turn 1 normally is you just move towards it and then you've gone closer to it from where you started. But if they move stuff off to the side to try and deal with your flank and super fast units, they're moving away from the mirror again. And it gets all its wounds again. I do really, other than Teclis existing, I really like the mirror right now. I think it's worth just talking about the point you just made as well about splitting fire. Didn't talk about this too much earlier, and I did mean to, is that you're not automatically splitting fire every turn to shoot stuff, to generate depravity, because I think that's a bit of a trap a lot of the time. If you're focusing on that, you have to make decisions every turn, whether you are going to split fire or concentrate it, and, whether you can afford to split fire, because ultimately splitting fire doesn't win your games. We all know one of the fundamentals you learn with shooting any game is you always want to kill things. Splitting fire is actively bad, generally. So you only want to do it when you have to, or when you think it's positive over focus and stuff. And sometimes maybe you'll do a bit of both. Like the way I'd see it, sequence is quite important. Like a unit of 10 bliss barbs, I'd probably want to be shooting at, like, with the first unit, a unit of 5 bliss barbs, I'd probably be splitting my fire between 3 units. Yeah, I'm hoping that one generated me 3 depravity, and then all the rest can then focus on something, and they're only 4s and 4s, so it's a 25% chance to get one through at Ren 1, but it might be a mortal as well. So generally with 15, I'd be putting 5 dice into each unit to up my average of getting 1 damage, and then everything else will focus on something, depending on how many depravity you need. And that's why I like the odd units of archers as well, because the 1 unit of archers with its 30 shots can do that, and it just frees up the rest of your army to shoot at the things that it really needs to, etc.
I just like to know in the hero phase before I make even my movement decisions, because they've only got an 18-inch range bow, right? They've got a big threat range, but ultimately where I end up placing them, the options of shooting are going to be less, right? As you start
limited, and if you get double turn, they're in combat.
Yeah. So I'd really like to know that. So I think that I think with where we are when we hit the verdict, which is the next section we're going to move on to, that I would take the endless spells, because these guys need every chance they can get, I think, this list. So how would you summarize Slaanesh?
I think so. I do think they're a tier 2 list, right? They're not worse than that by a long way. The Bliss Barb Seekers are very good. Summoning's very powerful. Locus can create you some game-winning situations. They do have the Bliss Barb Seekers putting so many raw wounds on the board really makes up for what the army lacks in like beef. And they've never had that. Even when they were at their best, they never had that. They never had the ability to put beef on the board that was worth taking, because Demonettes, outside of doing some Epicurean Revelers thing when that was cheap enough to do, were just really also not good enough in my opinion. And they can do that now. So yeah, I think they're tier 2. I think they're tier 2 with a lot of player decisions and things to do, but in a way that's good, because if you can pull all that off, you will surprise, as opposed to just playing something that's solidly tier 2 normally, where everyone knows what it does. You've got enough surprise options to pull it off to beat some tier 1 armies that aren't expecting it. I think, I think it's bad right now against the top armies because they're all shooting armies. And I think it's unlikely you would go 5-0 with this army, because it's very unlikely you won't run into one of those armies and then just have a very hard game when it's a player who's, similar skill level to you and you're just too disadvantaged by the army. But I do think those games are winnable. It's a 4-1 army. I mean, I've never dropped more than one game at a tournament in 10 years. And I don't think that as long as you're playing an army that is good enough to carry you through to that 4-1, you should be able to make it with any army that's tier 2. So I still think it's a 4-1 army, very capable. Bit of bad luck running into like Doc, Lumineth, Seraphon, or whatever. You're not going to be able to win all them, so you could easily have a horrible day with these right now.
You end up going 3-2 a lot with this.
Yeah, a lot or less.
There's a lot. Less. I think there's a lot of armies that outclass it a lot. So,
but equally, like we said before, it does have answers to those armies. Like I think this is potentially really good versus Seraphon.
Okay.
Because of just the sheer amount of low quality shooting that this puts out is actually what's really good against Seraphon. Is being able to just wipe their board presence off the board, because against most Seraphon armies, not all, but against most Seraphon armies, you don't need beef in the middle of the board that can fight over stuff. You need the ability to apply stuff at range. And what Seraphon Mortal Wounds don't like is things with a very high raw wound count, which is also what these have got. And these have also got, Seraphons, that you've also got enough dispels to throw at stuff with this army potentially to also be having to go with dispel on the spells as well. So I think this has actually got a lot of the things to beat Seraphon that a lot of other armies don't have. And that could potentially be maybe not a great matchup, but it could actually be a matchup in Slaanesh's favor, 55-45 or something like that. I think they will.
Respect for Seraphon is so low.
It's not low. I mean, I'm saying that in the context of what other people think Seraphon are, that I still don't agree with. But I think Seraphon have had a good time for quite a while, because there aren't really any armies that do the things that they don't like to see, and this is one of them. They also didn't like to see teleporting Daughters of Cain snakes. And that's gone already. But that would have been another thing that would have hurt them. The shooting hurts them. I don't think, when you compare the units in this book to their Lumineth equivalents, Lumineth are just better at absolutely everything that this book does. So I think these will have a very bad time against Lumineth, because it's just the same army but worse, especially if you've invested into endless spells, because all that goes off. And yeah, Eels is going to be a potentially tough matchup. That could be a struggle. Daughters of Cain with enough raw bodies on the board is going to be a struggle. So I can't see them 5-0.
On them,
but
I don't know if there's higher tiered armies that these guys can get wins against. I'm not sure, but yeah,
I think they've got enough stuff to get wins against them, particularly if you're not playing against a better player playing those armies. If you're playing against an average skill level player on a top army, you can beat them with this. It's definitely capable of winning one day. As less chance of running into those armies, maybe less people at the higher end playing it. I don't think it's worse than tier 2, and tier 2 is a very wide bracket of armies. I think it's got a lot of stuff in it that's good. The good thing about this book for me is there's nothing in it that can't be fixed with points changes.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get every unit in the book being good. You never do. But just some key points drops across the range, particularly across the battle line. If Demonettes go to 90 where they should probably be, if something gets battle line that didn't have it before, or if we drop down, like if some of the units like the Pain Ringers genuinely do come down mad points and someone says sorry they were meant to be 80, which I think is probably unlikely, but you need a few changes across the range. Bliss Barb Archers should probably come down 40 points going by the Lumineth equivalent, but even if they come down 20 it will open up the army quite a lot. So I think they're good. I think the tier 2, I think with some realistic points changes they'll be very solid tier 2 instead of like slightly dodgy tier 2. If they get a lot of good points changes because the battalions are so good and they've got so many options, they could definitely be tier 1. So hopefully that will happen. These
can see that point change. Like I looked at a few of the lists I've wrote or looked at the potential ones, and that like 200 points that we see armies drop by, overall, when you look at it boiled down onto a list, 100% kind of to these. We've seen that with KO, like 200 point drop, in an army list, and previous 2,000 points. We've seen it loads of times. They seem happy with that, and I think that these can easily get that treatment. Yeah. So, overall good for me. Like I'm buying this army and playing it now. I hope lots of other people who are excited about the armies or the models or already own some of them do. It's not a bad army. It will be a very fun to play army as well. Everything moves a million miles an hour. Like that's always super fun. Summoning stuff is super fun, often for you, not your opponent, but still super fun. So I think it's a good army, and I think it is because it can only get better, and it's not going to get nerfed. Sometimes when you invest in like a new S tier army, you're playing it for 3 to 6 months, and then that's it. Like at least when it's this way around, it's only going to get better. And therefore, you can invest into it. You can play it for a little bit happily, maybe one days or just casually practice or whatever. Ferret some stuff out, get some painted up, and when the points changes come, you're going in. So yeah, I like them. I think as an existing player of them as well, you add in some bits. Like you buy Spard Seekers, you buy some of the archers and things like that, and they're just tagged onto what you've already got. Similar situations to suppose you are, or like the guy talking about JP, probably things he's going to pick up on. And then maybe the army does get some big points drop, and then you just buy more of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
I said before, if the was I wanted a human army, I was prepared for them to be bad humans because I like good humans, but I was hoping to see a lot of humans on the board, and I'm not. So it's a shame. Yeah. But.
And they didn't get allegiance abilities, and Glutos doesn't actually interact very well with the humans. Like, which is he's like the allegiance abilities, isn't he? Like he's you take Glutos when you're playing humans. They don't want -1 to hit buffs because they're all either archers or don't want to be in combat in the first place or whatever. So yeah, and it's definitely disappointing in a lot of ways to come out. I mean, releasing a book that's like pre-nerfed is a classic Games Workshop thing that they do, right? Did it need to be this pre-nerfed? Probably not quite this pre-nerfed. But yeah, so there you go. That's the verdict. Tier 2 army. Some possibilities. Few different things you can do. Definitely enough to play with. Going to be super fun and are only going to get most likely, hopefully, better in the future.
That's great. Well, guys, look. Thank you all so much for joining us early on this Saturday morning. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you'll let your friends know, your other people, if you took some value from it, you learned something, let everyone know so they can come back and watch it. It'll all be up on YouTube. Please, again, if you'd like this video, give us a like, subscribe so you can keep up to date with all our content that we're going to try and keep putting out on YouTube. And we've got some big things planned, hopefully, for the future too. And of course, if you need to buy any of this stuff or you want any hobby supplies, anything at all, check out justplaygames.UK. Okay. Thanks very much for tuning in, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.